Something is about to reshape the entire future of the West Coast. The coastline, the infrastructure, the whole map. Scientists fear there is not one but two big earthquakes coming, one caused by another. This wasn't even on the radar for most people, but new research is changing everything. For decades, everyone treated the San Andreas Fault and the Cascadia subduction zone like two separate monsters that just happened to live in the same neighborhood. They were powerful, yes, but independent. But now, scientists believe these two giant faults are mechanically linked, and one can literally pull the other into rupturing shortly afterward. Cascadia moves, San Andreas moves. San Andreas tears, Cascadia tears. And the potential consequences of that are honestly haunting. Scientists found evidence that it happened at least 10 times in the last 3,100 years. Earthquake, pause, earthquake. It comes from marine sediment cores, which are like time capsules pulled up from the ocean floor. Researchers analyzed layer after layer of seabed sediment and found doublets, paired debris layers created by two massive quakes happening so close together that the ocean barely had time to settle between them. That discovery takes us to the Mendocino Triple Junction, the geological troublemaker of the West Coast. It's the place where three tectonic plates crash and grind into each other like badly aligned gears. It's also the zone where the San Andreas meets Cascadia, which makes it the perfect place for these double quakes to form. The stress changes caused by a rupture in one fault travel straight through this junction and destabilize the other. It's benign when it happens to a bookshelf. When you move one book, three others shift. But when you think about it like a coastline with millions of people, entire cities, major infrastructure, it instantly feels terrifying. To many people who live on the West Coast, the San Andreas kind of feels like a California's problem, and Cascadia like an Oregon and Washington's problem. But when you understand that these two faults can essentially fire at each other, it stops being a local issue and becomes a continental one. A Cascadia megaquake alone can hit magnitude 9.0 plus, rip open 600 to 700 miles of seafloor, and send a tsunami roaring toward the Pacific coast. And it could just be the first quake, and then, maybe minutes later, the San Andreas snaps in Northern California. The shaking could ripple down the state like a zipper tearing open a jacket, and if it goes the other direction, it could be just as bad. If the San Andreas ruptures first, the intense stress redistribution can destabilize the Cascadia subduction zone. You could get the California quake first with buildings rocking, highways breaking, and power stations failing. And then, soon after, the ocean pulls back in Oregon or Washington. And the 20-minute countdown to a tsunami begins, a follow-up disaster. It's the kind of chain reaction you don't want even in a video game, let alone real life. This discovery also tells us something eerie about the earthquake in 1700, the one that sent a tsunami across the Pacific so huge that it struck Japan with no warning. Japanese fishermen called that wave the orphan tsunami because it arrived without any felt shaking. Only centuries later, scientists figured out that it came from the Pacific Northwest. But until recently, no one knew that the San Andreas might have felt that event too, and it possibly slipped or destabilized because of it. So, the whole West Coast may have moved together. And we've come to the scariest part. All this isn't about if, it's strictly about when. The faults have a rhythm, a pace, and a geological heartbeat. We've seen how they behave across thousands of years. We know what they did, and now we know they sometimes do it in sequence. The real fear isn't the first quake. California already expects a big one. The real fear is the second quake, the one that comes before you've checked on your family, before emergency responders regroup, before the power comes back, and before the dust settles. Even if you don't live on the West Coast, this matters for you too. The ports in California, Oregon, and Washington handle a massive chunk of America's imports. Knock them offline, and it's not just the coastline that feels it. The ripple hits the entire country, and potentially the world. Grocery prices spike, supply chains freeze, gas availability dips, shipping timelines go nuts. The world is much more connected than any of us thought, and a geological double punch on the Pacific coast wouldn't stay a local disaster. It would spread, thread by thread, into everyone's life. So, those in power must prepare not for one giant rupture, but for two. Emergency plans, evacuation routes, response times, and power grid designs, all of it needs updating. Because nature has now shown us what even a single major rupture can do to a modern economy. It happened in Japan in 1995, on January 17th at 5:46 in the morning. The quake hit right by the northern tip of Awaji Island, only 12 miles from Kobe, a huge, busy city with about 1.4 million people back then, and another 2.6 million in Osaka nearby. The rupture ripped along the Nojima Fault for about 25 miles. That doesn't sound like much until you realize entire buildings can't survive that kind of sideways shove. More than 5,000 people lost their lives. 43,000 were injured. Nearly 400,000 buildings were irreparably damaged. This disaster hit one of Japan's largest industrial zones. And when you mess with a place like that, the shock doesn't stop at the shoreline. The damage was $200 billion US in losses, from smashed buildings and infrastructure and many businesses shutting down. Kobe's port just collapsed. Only 30% of the Osaka-Kobe railway lines worked. Part of National Route 28 literally vanished into the ground. Schools, hospitals, and municipal buildings, 85% of them took damage or were unusable. Fires broke out across Kobe, almost 300 separate incidents, burning the equivalent of 70 US city blocks and taking another 600 to 700 lives. Almost 100,000 people permanently left the region, 2.5% of the whole population gone in less than a year. And here's a detail that stuck with me. So many bridges failed that engineers suddenly had to confront how poorly older designs handled lateral shaking. Houses with heavy tiled roofs, built to fight typhoons, crumbled because all that weight sat too high. But the newer homes made after the 1981 building code revision stood. And that's when Japan realized that modern seismic standards were crucial to follow. Japan threw $58 billion US into restoring the region. Power came back in days. Roads and rail returned in 5 to 8 months. The main expressway took 21 months. The port was fully rebuilt in just over 2 years. And by then, all debris was cleared. Within 15 months, manufacturing jumped back to 98% of its old level. Stores reopened. By 1999, Kobe's economy reached roughly 75 to 90% of pre-quake levels. Japan overhauled its disaster management system entirely. They set up the Central Disaster Management Council and rewrote building codes. They upgraded everything from emergency drills to fire-resistant city layouts, and they launched the Earthquake Early Warning System that now gives Japan those precious few seconds before shaking hits. The same system that saved countless lives since 2007. But despite all this improvement, the Kansai region still sits on dangerous ground. The Roku-Awaji-shima fault system, the same one that snapped in 1995, still runs under them. The 2018 northern Osaka quake and the 2024 Noto Peninsula quake reminded everyone that this threat didn't disappear. It just waits its turn. A future large event on that system could hit even harder simply because the region has grown more complex, more interconnected, and more economically loaded. So Kobe wasn't even a triggered double fault rupture, but it still broke a major industrial hub, reshaped a national economy, and permanently changed global shipping routes. That's why when scientists started talking about two joint faults firing off back-to-back in Cascadia and San Andreas, you don't even have to imagine the consequences. We already got a preview in 1995. You rub your eyes, trying to make sense of everything. Perfect circular holes in the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Big Sur in California. You have no idea how this happened, even though you're a marine biologist who's been practicing it for years. You go through some of the old records and find out that these holes have been around since the 90s. In 1999, a ship-mounted sonar conducted a survey and found 5,200 of these pock marks, or large holes over 500 square miles, on the ocean floor. They look like moon craters underwater. You contact your team and get the robot ready to go down and explore the scene and bring back a few samples. You and the team drive to the coast and hop on the boat. You're sitting inside controlling the robot with a joystick. Your teammate sets the robot in the water and drives it down. Everything seems normal near the surface, but as the robot goes lower, the pock marks start appearing. A bunch of boats swift past you, making you lose your balance and focus. The robot turns on the flashlight so you can see better. But as it goes lower, the resolution is less crisp. It almost reaches the bottom, and the holes are smooth and nearly perfect circular shapes. Some of these holes that were visible in the sonar reading measure more than 30 feet across and 15 feet deep. You show the rest of your teammates the images, and they're shocked. The robot continues swimming, but there appear to be more holes all around. Many of them are too small for the scanner to capture from above. These microdepressions are steep and have sort of tails going in a certain direction. It's possible that the currents underwater played a role in their shape. Everywhere the robot swims, there are new holes all around. After a couple of hours, the robot goes back to the boat with some samples. You take them back to the lab and study them. The robot clearly captures images of human trash, but the samples don't indicate anything alarming for now. Despite the fact that 1/3 of the pockets are filled with trash, there's still no explanation of how they were formed. It's late at night and the rest of your team heads back home. You're passing out in the lab, still trying to find some answers. You wake up the next day, and while cooking breakfast, you get this idea that maybe these holes are gases venting out, which could be harmful to marine life. You quickly get the robot and sail out to the ocean once more. This time, you didn't even think about calling your teammates. You place the robot in the water and get behind the screen to control it. The robot descends to the bottom of the ocean and does a survey. So far, the holes still seem to be covered with trash. But some of the holes have marine life dwelling inside, like fish and seaweed. After much scanning, it doesn't look like they're producing any bubbles, which means there aren't any gases venting out, but you're determined to find them. After a while, you reach one of those large pock marks, and the robot starts scanning around. You find some bubbles coming from a source, but the robot can't reach it. It swims around trying to find a spot, but nothing. You bring the robot back to the lab and work on it. You attach some mechanical arms on it that can lift things and move them. You bring the robot back down to the same spot, but the bubbles aren't as frequent as before. You use the arms to move some of the trash and find out that the bubbles are being produced by a group of crabs chilling next to a pile of plastic. Bingo! The bad news is, you still don't have a clue why the microdepressions and pockmarks exist. As you try to control the robot to go back to the surface, an octopus wraps its tentacles around it, pulling the robot down. You struggle with the controls and push it to maximum power, but the suctions of the octopus are too strong to break off. It's a game of tug-of-war with the octopus and your robot. It takes the robot under a pile of trash, thinking it's lunch. But you use the arms to maneuver the robot out and swim back to the surface. You go back to the lab even more confused. The robot has collected more samples for you to study. Your eye is glued to your microscope, trying to figure out what's going on, but nothing. You decide to do a carbon dating test to determine how old these holes are. After a while, you check out the results and are even more stunned than before. They show that the holes are around 400,000 years old, so it's likely that human trash wasn't the cause for all this. You pull many all-nighters trying to figure out the truth. You gather your team once more and hold a small press conference about this. You claim that this may be something we should be extremely worried about, but you still can't tell them more than what you know. With all the brain work put together, you find out that the large pockmarks haven't changed or been active for more than 50,000 years. The newer holes were most likely created by human trash settling in the bottom of the ocean floor. The marine life gathered some of this trash like plastics and discarded fishing gear and created homes for themselves. This is why around 4,500 of the holes are newer and have trash in them. but it still doesn't answer why the holes appeared in the first place. You're back to square one. The only way to see what's really going on is to clear up the trash from underwater and study them. The story makes headlines in the local community and catches the attention of a cleanup crew. You organize a trip to the ocean and begin the extraction of all the trash. Many cleanup boats arrive and everyone drops down a net to collect the trash. You send down the robot once more to make sure the nets are hitting the right spot. As most of the trash is being collected, many marine life animals scramble and try to find a way to escape. Everyone makes sure not to hurt them. After a couple of weeks, all the holes are cleared up from the trash. You do another sonar scan from the surface and can see the holes clearer than before. But you still don't have an answer for this. You do some more research trying to see if any other holes appeared around the world. On the other side of the country is a mysterious blue hole off of Florida's Gulf Coast. You catch the nearest flight to Florida and make an appointment with the scientists in charge of the expedition. Blue holes are underwater sinkholes that open below the seabed. Just like on the surface, the underwater world also has sinkholes. This one is called the Green Banana and is 150 feet below, and the hole is 435 feet deep. You dive with some special gear with the rest of the team to a barren ocean floor, and the hole is right there in front of you, looking like an oasis in the desert. You and the rest of the scientists are surprised by the diverse marine life dwelling within. Some sea turtles swim past you, and even sharks. These ones don't harm humans. Halfway through, you reach a narrow path, which makes it difficult for humans to pass through. But everyone is careful. There are corals, sponges, mollusks around the corner. You collect some samples and go back to the lab. Blue holes in general are richer in nutrients than barren lands and host plenty of unique marine life. They're quite common and don't pose any sort of threat to anyone. After making the connections, you don't think the holes off the coast of California have anything to do with blue holes. The mystery goes on.
So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas fault line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something it can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed, but Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe. Hey, can you lift a truck with your hands? No? Shocker. But let me introduce you to nature's original strongman, the ocean, which casually tossed 700-ton boulders around like they were pebbles during a mega tsunami that hit Africa thousands of years ago. This wasn't just a bad day at the beach. This mega tsunami was so powerful, it made the 2004 Indonesian and 2011 Japanese tsunamis look like kiddie pool splashes. Now, to give you an idea of how terrifying regular tsunamis already are, the Japan tsunami produced waves 133 feet tall. The Indian Ocean tsunami was slightly smaller, but it took over 200,000 lives across many countries. Now imagine something way worse. You see, for a long time, scientists thought waves that big were just science fiction. But then they found these enormous boulders, massive chunks of rock, flung far inland, and did the math. It turns out only waves around 800 feet tall could have pulled off that kind of rocky vandalism. And the culprit? A volcano that literally fell apart into the ocean and triggered one of the most powerful tsunamis Earth has ever seen. Usually, tsunamis are blamed on underwater earthquakes, tectonic plates getting into slap fights. But volcanoes? Oh, they've got tsunami potential too. In 1883, for example, a volcano in Indonesia named Krakatoa erupted for 6 months non-stop until it exploded, and the explosion was heard all the way in Australia. This triggered many tsunamis, some almost 100 feet tall. Still, that was more like a toe dip compared to the full cannonball from the mega tsunami. Back in ancient times, the volcano that crumbled during the mega tsunami was huge, and it didn't just fall apart. It lost a chunk that was 10 times the size of Mount Everest. 10 Mount Everests. It was like the Earth wanted to see what would happen if we threw a mountain into the ocean just for fun. It was so massive that when the entire side of the volcano belly flopped into the Atlantic, it created waves that could cover the Statue of Liberty 3 times. It also destroyed an island more than 30 miles away. The volcano behind this real-life Michael Bay scene was called Fogo, located on, you guessed it, Fogo Island. This island is basically just a whole single volcano that rose from the sea thanks to a magma hotspot, a place in the ocean where a lot of magma escapes and erupts like an underwater volcano. Over time, this magma cooled and stacked up like pancakes until, voila, after 7 major eruptions, the island popped out of the ocean like it was playing peekaboo. Surprise, it's a volcano. But Fogo's dramatic entrance was also a ticking time bomb. You see, the more a volcano grows, the heavier it gets, and if there's not enough magma inside it to support it, the whole thing can just collapse. Sometimes it doesn't take much. A minor earthquake, some erosion, or just a poor foundation made of soft sediment can trigger a collapse. It's like a really tall guy trying to balance over a bunch of marbles. Fogo had all the bad luck ingredients: too tall, too heavy, and built on squishy ground. And it gets worse. As the volcano grows heavier, it starts squishing the magma underneath. That lava can't rise, so it just simmers down there, slowly thickening like soup left on a burner for too long. Gases build up, pressure increases, and eventually, kaboom! It's the volcanic version of eating too many burritos and then trying to hold in a sneeze. This massive pressure and imbalance can trigger what's called a flank collapse, which is science speak for oops, half the volcano just fell into the ocean. That's what happened with Fogo. Most of the volcanic islands that form this way are long gone, but Fogo is still very much alive and kicking. In fact, it last erupted in 2014, and considering that it goes off every 20 years, maybe don't travel to Fogo Island in around 2034. For the longest time, scientists believe only big, bulky volcanic islands could collapse like this. But new research says that even smaller, skinnier guys, like the Danny DeVitos of the island world, aren't safe either. The thing is that small volcanic islands only seem stable because of their small mass. It's like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger both slipping on the ice. Arnie's fall might cause more chaos, but Danny can still go flying. And those little collapses? Yes, they matter. Take Santa Maria, a tiny island that's about 170 times smaller than Hawaii. It has collapsed multiple times, not because it wanted to, but because it's basically standing on soggy breadcrumbs. Its foundation is loose marine sediment, and to make things worse, it's sitting right next to the East Azores Fault, where 3 tectonic plates meet up for daily slap fights. This fault is responsible for many earthquakes and even some tsunamis that happened in Lisbon in the past, so you can imagine what it's like living right above it. Every time the volcano in Santa Maria erupts and grows, it also sinks. But when a chunk collapses, it bounces back up like a buoy. This seamount to island again roller coaster means that Santa Maria has popped in and out of the ocean like a submarine playing peekaboo, and with every peak comes a potential tsunami. Another volcano with similar trust issues is Pacaya, located in Guatemala. Between 2011 and 2013, scientists spotted strange movements in the soil, tiny shifts that suggested something underneath was getting restless. Sure enough, in 2014, Pacaya erupted. Luckily, it didn't collapse, but that risk still looms, especially if magma gets trapped in it like it did with Fogo. The consequences could be explosive, literally. In fact, about 1,000 years ago, Pacaya experienced a collapse that sent debris avalanches more than 15 miles away. Since then, it's rebuilt itself like a fiery phoenix, but it could still crumble again. That's why volcanologists obsess over the tiniest wobbles. It's not paranoia if the mountain really might fall. Now you might be thinking here, okay, but that was the past. Surely that kind of ridiculous mega tsunami collapse can't happen again, right? Well, welcome to the 21st century. Islands like Hawaii, La Palma in Spain, and various parts of the Caribbean are sitting on the same kind of geological whoopee cushions. All it takes is the right combo: loose foundation, steep slopes, maybe some trapped magma, and boom, flank collapse. In fact, it's already happened recently. In 2018, Anak Krakatau, the volcanic baby of the infamous Krakatoa, lost a big chunk of itself during an eruption. It caused a tsunami, but it was more awkward than devastating, like a volcano losing its pants on stage. Embarrassing, but survivable. But that's just amateur hour compared to history's real showstoppers. Ritter Island's 1888 collapse was so intense that the island literally got shorter. It went from being more than 2,000 feet tall to a mere 460 feet. But the record holder is the legendary Latua Bay megasplash from 1958, where a 7.8 magnitude earthquake triggered a massive landslide that sent a wave taller than the Empire State Building roaring through Alaska at highway speeds. Strangely enough, only 5 people lost their lives here, but on the other hand, the destruction path it left behind can still be seen today, all the way from space. Melting glaciers and ice caps can make volcanoes collapse too. When they melt, there's a sudden decrease in pressure on Earth's crust that can destabilize entire volcanoes. It's called isostatic rebound. It's like suddenly yanking a chair out from under someone who's been sitting still for centuries. Whoops. Also, here's something you probably never thought you'd worry about on your island getaway. Some volcanic islands grow outward as lava pours into the sea, creating unstable platforms known as lava deltas. These deltas can collapse without warning, taking newly formed land, and sometimes tourists too, right back into the ocean. No pressure though, just thought, maybe you want to stay off steaming new land. So yeah, next time you're lounging on a beachy volcanic island thinking, wow, this place is paradise. Just remember, It might also be a ticking geological time bomb with a flair for the dramatic. From ancient mountain-sized cannonballs to surprise lava deltas, volcanoes have a history of keeping things spicy.
We know more about space than we do about the ocean. We know more about the ocean than we do about the Earth's core. But how do we study something that lies more than 1,000 miles beneath our feet? Oddly enough, you need to fly into space. Thanks to satellites orbiting the planet, scientists have discovered something strange at the very heart of the planet. News about mysterious signals from space barely surprises anyone. But how about this? We detected strange signals coming from deep beneath our own home. Before we go into those signals, we need to understand why it's so important to study what's inside the planet. How does the core affect us? Our lives depend on it in several crucial ways. First, the core plays a fundamental role in gravity. We don't drift off into space because a massive spherical mass of molten metal locks us to the surface. Second, it powers Earth's magnetic field. Dangerous cosmic radiation and solar wind that could scorch everything are blocked thanks to the planet's magnetic field. And third, the inner processes of the Earth influence earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Any disturbance inside the core and mantle can change life on the planet. And recently, scientists recorded something unusual coming from down there. At the beginning of this century, the United States and Germany launched a mission called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. At first, this project used 2 satellites to track how water moved around the planet and how glaciers were melting. But the satellites could also measure Earth's gravitational field. If gravity was slightly stronger or weaker in some region, one of the satellites would be pulled toward that spot, and the other would measure the change in distance. In very simple terms, the heavier something is, the stronger its gravitational pull. In certain parts of the planet, gravity can be slightly higher because of large geological shifts, ocean currents, or melting ice. But between 2006 and 2008, the GRACE satellites detected a strange change in gravity along the coast of Africa. Melting ice, water movement, and other natural phenomena couldn't explain the anomaly. No one knew what it was at the time, but years later, scientists suggested that the nature of this signal was coming from the Earth's core. Researchers noticed that some minerals, like perovskite, can undergo a phase transition when exposed to enormous pressure and extreme heat. And there are many perovskites lying in the upper layers of the mantle. When the internal structure of this mineral reshapes, it becomes denser and shifts the surrounding rocks. Deep underground, this harder, solid part moves the softer molten rock. These movements reach the molten outer core and slightly deform it. This deformation inside the core alters the flow of molten iron, and this deep current of liquid metal directly affects Earth's magnetic field. That's why satellites recorded those fluctuations. So how does all of this affect us? We launch satellites, we use compasses, we rely on GPS. All of this works only because gravity and the magnetic field are stable, and both depend on the core. That's why it's so important to study the Earth's heart. And to do that, we don't need to dig thousands of miles. Movements on the surface can reveal what is happening inside. Studying vibrations in the crust, recording gravitational shifts, calculating, modeling, and forming hypotheses. It all sounds a little boring. Is there another way to figure out what's happening down there? We sent Voyagers into space, and some of them have already left the solar system. We descend into the depths of the Mariana Trench inside bathyskiffs. So what's the problem with drilling a shaft deep into the Earth's crust? Humanity actually has some experience with this. In the 1970s, Soviet geologists began drilling the Kola Super Deep borehole. It became and remains the deepest artificial borehole ever created. Its depth reaches 7.6 miles, deeper than the Mariana Trench and higher than Mount Everest. More than 50 years have passed, and humanity has not gone deeper than 7.6 miles. And do you know where the Earth's core begins? At about 1,800 miles down. That's almost 7 times farther than the distance to the International Space Station. To reach the core, we would need to drill a hole 230 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. But that project was shut down in 1992, and the borehole was closed in 2005. What stopped us from digging deeper? First, the density of the rock. In the early stages, the drill easily cut through granite, but around 4.3 miles down, the rock became much harder. The drill broke several times. Workers had to change the drilling direction to pass through softer layers. Eventually, the borehole's shape looked like a string of lights hanging on a Christmas tree. Another problem was heat. The deeper the engineers went, the hotter it became. Scientists expected that past a depth of 10,000 feet, the temperature would be around 212 degrees Fahrenheit. In reality, the harder they worked, the worse it got. Eventually, it reached 356 degrees Fahrenheit. The hottest place on Earth is the Sonoran Desert along the Mexican-US border. Temperatures there can reach 177 degrees Fahrenheit. That's twice as cool as inside that terrifying borehole. And the challenges did not stop there. At a depth of about 14,800 feet, the rock became porous. The extreme heat gave it a strange plasticity. Instead of solid stone, the drill had to cut through something more like hot, softened material that was almost impossible to drill. On top of that, the stability of the shaft became a danger. At such depths, the walls could collapse at any moment. To drill deeper, humanity would need completely new technology, a drill capable of working at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature scientists expect in the upper mantle, located just beneath the crust. And to reach it, we would need to drill 25 miles down, almost 3 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. There are many rumors about what the engineers supposedly discovered in that hole. The most popular claim is that they heard the screams of thousands of people who were stuck in the fiery underworld. Other fake stories claim that the workers went insane after seeing something horrific at the bottom, and that's why the project was stopped. But if we ignore these myths, what did scientists actually find? They learned that the existing temperature model of Earth's interior was wrong. It was far hotter down there than expected. Geologists thought they would find the so-called Conrad discontinuity, a transition from granite to basalt. They found no such boundary. The real discovery was a liquid at incredible depths. Scientists found cracks filled with briny water. This changed our understanding of the crust. People used to believe it was completely solid, but now it appears full of fractures and channels through which water can move. Where did it come from? Geologists think the fluid was squeezed out of the rocks by enormous pressure, as water is wrung out of a sponge. But the most astonishing discovery was life. At about 4.5 miles down, engineers found ancient fossils of single-celled marine organisms. They were nearly 2 billion years old, and they had survived at such extreme heat and pressure. Let's imagine that one day we actually reach the mantle. What would that give us? What would we expect to see? We would finally understand how Earth formed billions of years ago, how the core, mantle, and crust developed, and how plate tectonics works. We'd know how the plates push and pull against each other. We'd gain a deeper understanding of earthquakes. Researchers also hope to find extremophiles. These are primitive organisms that can withstand extreme heat and pressure. If we discover life near the mantle or even within it, scientists will study it closely and try to understand how it manages to survive under such brutal conditions. If we learn what keeps life alive in the most hostile environment beneath our feet, we might learn how to protect life in other extreme places. From the depths of the ocean to distant planets, studying the heart of our planet could reveal technologies we can barely imagine today. Our future might depend on the mysteries hidden beneath our own world.
You have friends over for dinner. You set your drink on the counter and go help your friend set out some desserts. When you get back, you notice the liquid in your cup. It's sloshing around and the ice cubes look like ships on a rough sea. Now you feel it too. On the ceiling, the chandelier is swinging like mad. Then you hear someone scream, "Earthquake!" The house and everything in it is rocking back and forth. You try to run for cover, but the shaking keeps you stuck in place, fighting to keep your balance. The cabinets look possessed, and glasses and dishes fly out and smash on the floor. The bookshelves topple over, and everything hanging on the walls sways and falls off. You duck under the dining room table, trying not to get hurt on all those broken dishes. Yeah, you've been through earthquakes before, but none like this. Checking your phone? Typical, no signal. You can't believe what's about to happen. The screams get louder, and suddenly the whole house collapses. The biggest earthquake ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. Disaster came in the afternoon, just when everyone was out enjoying themselves. To cause serious, life-changing damage, you need to have a magnitude of around 7 or so on the Richter scale. This one was 9.5. This part of Chile is smack dab on the so-called Ring of Fire, the most active volcanic and seismic area in the world along the Pacific Rim. The initial shaking lasted around 10 minutes, and after 2 days, many aftershocks were still strong enough to set off a volcano in the south of the country. But that's not where it ended. The earthquake unleashed a series of tidal waves all over the Pacific Ocean, with some reaching over 80 feet high. The waves in earthquake were so strong that they even affected Hawaii, Japan, and the Philippines. It caused around $500 million $1960 worth of damage. Many were left homeless. Much of their infrastructure was smashed too. Buildings as far as the eye could see were toppled, and debris piled everywhere. Scientists estimate that this earthquake was so powerful, it shifted the Earth's axis, making our days 1.26 microseconds shorter. That might not seem like a lot, but think about it. Just one natural disaster was strong enough to make time move. Many of the coastal cities were flattened and floods were widespread. The economy spiraled downward. According to studies, if this earthquake happened today, it caused more than $20 billion in damages. So what would happen if an earthquake twice that size hit without warning? For starters, you'd likely feel the effects even further away. Tidal waves wouldn't just hit the coasts of Japan and the Philippines. They would move even further to China, Korea, Vietnam, and even Australia. And those waves would be significantly higher than 80 feet, perhaps double that. That's like 8 giraffes piled on top of each other, surfing your way. If you lived by the coast, you'd notice the waves. If you saw the water recede way back so you could practically see where all the fish call home, you'd know it was time to run. Chances are that a tsunami's heading your way. Say it really happens. You're caught under the wreckage, not knowing what's going on. You manage to free yourself and escape to the fresh air. And you're not alone, because all the houses in the neighborhood have turned into piles of bricks and rubble. The bridges have also collapsed, leaving people stranded on either side. You look around, dust yourself off, and rush to find help. Fire trucks and ambulances drive between the broken-down cars and rubble. You try to make it to your car, but the aftershocks are still hitting, and you're getting tossed to the sidewalk. With all the cell towers down, you can't call anyone on your phone. Your knees are shaking, but you manage to power through. Once you reach your car, you see it crushed under a boulder, like a giant soda can. You continue on foot and eventually reach downtown. It looks as if some giant got angry and knocked all the buildings down. You push forward and try to see if you can find some help. Without warning, your phone vibrates. You check it and see 1,000 notifications about a 20-magnitude earthquake. You're still shaking, but that's all you. The ground is still for now. Uh-oh. You hear something in the distance, racing towards you. To your right, you see tidal waves as tall as buildings charging at you. Still in shock, not knowing what to do, you now come to your senses and run. You don't even know which way to go. There's a tsunami right behind you, and in front of you are broken down buildings with rocks and concrete still falling everywhere. Wait, there's a building that's somehow still standing. You need to get on top of that thing. You reach the elevator, but it's jammed. Not surprising. You bolt up the stairs as fast as you can, tripping on broken glass and plaster, but always managing to get back up. You look out a window and see the water. It's so close. You're nearly at the top. A few more flights and… whoosh. The water forces its way into the building and drags you down at least 2 floors. You can barely see anything. Still, you know you must swim up. But the water keeps forcing you downwards. After about 30 seconds, you manage to swim your way out and continue climbing to the top. You scramble to the top floor and collapse on the roof. You're safe for now. The tidal wave is still going strong, plowing its way through the ravaged city center. Your phone is now waterlogged and useless. You have a perfect 360-degree view of your town covered in water and debris. The ground starts to shake again. Maybe you'll just sit around until this is all over, waiting for the rescue helicopter. But then, a loud explosion that almost breaks your eardrums shakes the ground even more. Off in the distance, smoke is rising, and soon it covers the entire sky. Darkness hides the morning sun. That's when you can see lava shooting up into the air and landing nearby. The lava forms into a river, flowing its way into town block by block. With this much seismic movement and the high intensity of the earthquake, the world's tectonic plates have shifted so that magma is pushing its way to the surface. From the earth, steam begins to vent. Then the heat hits you. You see the magma cover the ground like a blanket, eating up every car in its way. What's worse is that the magma is melting the foundations of the buildings that managed to withstand the earthquake and the tsunami. The buildings in the distance are now sinking and collapsing into the raging lava pool that's replaced your town. One by one, every building descends. That means, uh-oh, the building where you're standing is also swaying. It's about to fail. That's when you see the light. You look up and see a helicopter above in the distance. You wave your arms, run around, jump, anything to get noticed. And it works. The chopper makes a few circles and finally drops you a rope ladder. As you're lifted in the chopper, you take a good look at the world below you as it wriggles around like noodles in a strainer. You land a few miles out and are immediately treated by a doctor in an emergency triage center. You were one of the lucky ones. A year later, the tsunami water has receded. The lava that flowed inland has cooled, but all that magma permanently changed the ground below it, and the whole town is gone. The disaster has thrown the entire country into a financial nightmare that'll last decades. It takes months to survey the town, making sure there's no dangerous electrical wires or busted gas pipes anywhere. They're rebuilding your town farther inland from where the old one was. In other towns, they rebuild directly over the ruins. In others, they just decide to move everyone to a nearby city.
See this big spot under the water near the shore? It's a coral reef. It beckons you to swim closer, but be careful. If you get there, it could be the last swim of your life. Stay away from the reef. But why? Why are coral reefs so dangerous? Let's figure it out. First, make your guess about what a coral reef is. An underwater cliff? Rocks? A coastal landscape? Some spot where shells live? Close, but not true. In short, a coral reef is a living thing. What we see in shallow tropical waters are colonies of organisms called coral polyps. They are distant relatives of jellyfish and anemones with amazing superpowers. They can absorb calcium from the water. When they do this, they convert calcium into hard limestone rocks. These rocks, like building blocks, form solid coral reefs and settle on the seabed. But there are soft coral reefs that look like plants. They float freely with the currents, swing in different directions, and seem to pulsate under the water. They don't have solid coral blocks, but they can grow tree-like cores to maintain their position. Both hard and soft coral reefs are beautiful creatures, but at the same time, they are very dangerous. Many ships were wrecked when they hit shallow water, as the sharp edges of coral reefs ripped through their hulls. But what danger is there for someone swimming alone, who isn't going to hit the reef? You can just scuba dive and enjoy the beautiful views of coral polyps, but be prepared to encounter unexpected and unpleasant creatures. A coral reef is not just a living colony, it's a home for thousands of diverse marine creatures. And some of them can be very dangerous for humans. Like the blue-ringed octopus, for example. This is a tiny creature that you will definitely notice thanks to the bright spots on its body, but don't touch it with your hand, as it's one of the most venomous creatures on Earth. The amount of toxic venom carried by this octopus can harm 26 people, and these people are unlikely to survive this encounter. The poison works within a few minutes, and there's no antidote in the world. What makes it even more dangerous is that the octopus's sting is painless. You probably won't even know you've been stung until the first symptoms appear: body paralysis, respiratory problems, and cardiac arrest. But even if you don't notice the octopus and swim past, you'll probably notice the box jellyfish, whose tentacles can reach several feet in length. It looks like a creature from deep space, and you better not approach it. The box jellyfish is considered the world's most venomous creature. There are special cells in their tentacles that release a toxin called nematocysts. Over the past 100 years, roughly 70 people lost their lives after encountering these jellyfish. But most likely the number is much higher. We just don't know about all such cases. Unlike the painless sting of the blue-ringed octopus, the encounter with a box jellyfish hurts. Another dangerous inhabitant of coral reefs is a rock. Yes, take a look. It's just a rock that's part of the reef. But wait a minute, it seems to be moving. Don't touch it. It's incredibly venomous. By now, you've probably already realized that this is not a stone. This is the stonefish. And this sullen-looking guy is one of the most venomous fish on the planet. Do you see those little spikes along its spine? The fish raises them when it feels in danger. If the toxin covering these spikes enters your body, you have less than an hour to take the antidote. If you don't make it in time, better not dwell on the worst-case scenario. Do you still want to swim closer to the coral reef? If so, go ahead. There are other scary creatures there. This one, for example, doesn't pretend to be a rock or something harmless. It looks dangerous, and it is dangerous. It's the moray eel. These underwater snakes are not venomous, but meeting them can be unpleasant. They can bite quite painfully, but only if you disturb them in their burrows. Of course, you probably won't want to tease these creatures, but you might accidentally approach their burrow without knowing they live there and poke it with your finger. Once you do it, get ready for a payback strike. By the way, moray eels are poisonous because they eat toxic algae and fish. However, they can't use this poison against you unless you try to eat them. As you approach the coral reef, you may encounter a flying dagger. This is the needlefish, a thin, fast fish with a sharp nose and prickly needle-like teeth. It swims near the surface close to coral reefs at high speed and then jumps out of the water and flies at a speed of 37 miles per hour. Many people have reported getting seriously injured by this guy. This one looks like barbed wire shaped like a star. Hundreds of sharp needles cover the crown of thorns starfish's body, and you'd better not touch them. Each thorn on their body contains dangerous toxins that cause pain, nausea, swelling, and can even lead to anaphylactic shock. Coral reefs are not just a place for them to hang out, but also food. This starfish bulges out its stomach, covers the reef surface with it, and absorbs nutrients from it. It's like something straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. But don't think that corals are something scary and dangerous. In fact, coral reefs are some of the most useful things in the ocean. They even save people's lives. Do you know that lines of coral reefs cushion the impact of tsunamis and protect the shores from flooding? Some large reefs, like the Great Barrier Reef, are the boundary between the open sea and shallow waters. They stretch along the coast and form a protective wall that serves as a barrier against tsunamis and landslides. During a storm, rocky coral reefs disperse large waves and soften their impacts on the shore. But the coolest thing is that corals help your Instagram profile look better. What? Yes, that's right. Do you know these beautiful paradise-style photos when the water near the shore is blue and the sand on the beach is white? So sand gets this unique color thanks to corals. As you already know, coral bodies are made up of calcium carbonate. When waves and storms destroy corals, they wash out these calcium particles directly onto the shore. Besides corals, tiny bits of crushed seashells also end up there. Over time, layer by layer, they build up to form white sandy beaches. By the way, parrotfish are also involved in creating this beauty. These little fish feed on algae that stick to coral reefs, so they also consume pieces of coral along with their food. Then, when they're full, they release the coral particles, which eventually become the white sand. One such fish releases about 200 pounds of coral waste per year. So in a sense, this white sand appears because parrotfish go number 2. Coral reefs are ancient. The average reef grows at a rate of about 0.7 inches per year. And now look at their sizes. The Great Barrier Reef stretches for more than 1,430 miles, and it's been growing for 8,000 years. It's been here since people began to develop agriculture, domesticate animals, and build the first settlements. And some reefs are much, much older. That's why it's so important to preserve this unique natural wonder. And humans end up destroying it, often when ships accidentally crash into coral reefs. When this happens, it ruins the home for thousands of sea creatures. Ocean ecosystems get majorly impacted. But we also try to improve the situation. Coast guards protect the areas where coral reefs grow so that no vessel can approach them. These majestic creatures are a crucial part of nature, and this is another equally important reason why we should stay away from them.
If all the volcanoes on Earth suddenly erupted together, it'd be loud. We'd also have around 1,500 of these formations bursting at once. Now normally it's just 10 to 20 volcanoes that are active each day. But what would the world look like if they all blew their tops simultaneously? Geologists think it wouldn't be pretty. Even if only the land volcanoes erupted together, it would set off a chain reaction way worse than anything we've ever seen before. The two big problems would be ash and volcanic gases. While the explosions in lava would be damaging for people nearby, the real danger lies in what happens next. A thick layer of ash would cover the planet, blocking out sunlight completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means crops would fade away and temperatures would drop considerably. And all this ash cloud could remain in our atmosphere for up to 10 years. Now, ash aside, there's also acid rain to worry about. Volcanic gases like hydrochloric acid and sulfur dioxide would mix with the atmosphere and fall back down as acid rain. This type of weather would harm the groundwater and ocean surfaces. Even if humans would find a way to survive up to this point, we'd have no corals and no other sea creatures around. Scientists have seen similar events in Earth's history at a smaller scale. Big volcanic eruptions have been linked to mass extinctions. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it cooled parts of the world for 2 years. But the extra carbon dioxide from these eruptions could also heat the planet, the same way we turn our stoves to broil for that extra crispy layer on our casserole. Geologists also mentioned that there's evidence in our atmosphere that stuff like this may have happened in the distant past. During the Cretaceous period, carbon dioxide levels were way higher than today, which made it difficult for marine life to thrive. Who would survive all this? Probably just some extremophiles, these organisms that survive in harsh conditions like hot springs or deep undersea vents. As for humans, we could all lay low in underground bunkers until things clear up, or build multiple space stations that could fit us all. Yeah, right. The chances of all volcanoes erupting at once, though, are very slim. Whew! That's because there isn't one giant source supplying all the volcanoes on Earth. Each one of these openings has its own deposit of magma, except for a few cases where they indeed share the supply. For example, in 1912, Nova Rupta in Alaska erupted alongside another volcano sharing magma. Scientists have also found evidence of magma hiding under volcanic areas, like under the Taupau volcanic zone in New Zealand. This magma can spread out horizontally for long distances, but is still just a local feature. Even if we consider all the magma under Taupau as one system, it's not connected to other volcanic areas like Indonesia or the Philippines. Because the great majority are isolated, volcanoes can't sync up to erupt at once. The magma comes from different processes, like mantle decompression or adding water to the mantle through subduction. There's no way to make all these different volcanoes erupt together because of how tectonics work. Now, that doesn't mean we won't see interesting volcano activity in the future. Take an underwater area near British Columbia, where recently about 200 small earthquakes per hour have been noted. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, off the coast of Vancouver Island, magma is set to erupt, heating the water so much that it'll bubble like soda. However, this event will likely go unnoticed by anyone other than scientists. The anticipated eruption will most likely happen around 3 miles below the ocean surface. Scientists explain that the earthquakes range from negative to 4.1 magnitude, meaning only those nearby would feel any tremors. This unusual activity gives us a rare opportunity to study how the Earth's crust forms. The magma beneath the ocean floor is estimated to be almost 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but will cool rapidly upon eruption and contact with water. This runny rock will solidify upon contact with the seafloor, turning black quickly. This event will be useful for biologists too, who will have the opportunity to study the marine animals' response to any changes, like run! Antarctica, often seen as a vast icy continent, also holds a volcanic surprise beneath its frozen surface. Researchers have identified over 130 under the western ice sheet alone, making it the largest volcanic region on Earth. Most of these volcanoes, about 90, were only recently discovered in 2017. But could any of these Antarctic volcanoes actually erupt? Well, it depends on which volcano we're talking about. While these formations are relatively young in geologic terms, it's hard for scientists to tell if they're still active or not. There are only 2 confirmed active volcanoes in Antarctica, Deception Island and Mount Erebus. The latter, standing tall as the highest peak on the continent, has been continuously erupting since at least 1972. It's known for emitting gas and steam, and sometimes even throwing out rocks in what are called strombolian eruptions. One of its most notable features is a persistent lava lake in its crater, a rare phenomenon due to specific conditions needed to keep the surface molten. For instance, it's fueled by a steady supply of magma from deep within the Earth's mantle. This continuous inflow of molten rock provides the material for the lava lake to exist. It also features low ambient temperatures. Despite its location in Antarctica, Erebus has relatively mild temperatures in its summit region because of the heat generated by the volcanic activity. This allows the lava lake to remain liquid rather than freezing over. Deception Island, another active volcano, last erupted in the 70s. While it's currently not showing signs of imminent eruption, it's being monitored closely for any concerning activity. Apart from these 2 being confirmed to be active, Antarctica is dotted with fumaroles, openings in the Earth's crust that release gases and vapors. Sometimes these fumaroles can create icy towers reaching heights of 10 feet. What we should focus on is maybe supervolcanoes. They're this type that has the potential to produce the most massive and destructive eruptions. Unlike the typical one, which has a single vent, supervolcanoes have a vast magma chamber beneath the surface, spanning tens or even hundreds of miles in diameter. Their eruptions can have catastrophic effects on the surrounding area and even impact global climate patterns because of the amounts of ash and gases they spill out into the atmosphere. One famous supervolcano is the Yellowstone one. which some say is gearing up for another eruption. It has the capacity to unleash a colossal eruption, spewing over 240 cubic miles of material. As much as we'd like to predict its behavior, volcanoes don't stick to a calendar. On the contrary, eruptions simply happen when there's enough magma beneath the surface. There also needs to be enough pressure for the magma to travel upwards. As far as we can measure, these conditions are not currently met at Yellowstone. Sure, many volcanoes operate on a cyclical pattern, but that doesn't mean Yellowstone is overdue. In fact, Yellowstone has had just 3 major eruptions over the past 2.1 million years. Also, the term supervolcano refers to the formation's size, not necessarily how fussy it is. Yellowstone's monitoring is extensive, tracking seismicity, ground deformation, thermal emissions, gas, water chemistry, and surface changes. Signs of an eruption would include thousands of earthquakes over a short period. We'd also see deformation on the ground and weird gas emissions ahead of time. Stable as it might look like for now, the consequences of it having a major eruption could look ugly. Ash dispersion could blanket a 500-mile radius, potentially disrupting Midwest agriculture and clogging waterways. Ash and gas emissions into the stratosphere could induce global climatic effects, making our planet colder for several years. And yes, we've seen some research that it shows there's more liquid molten rock under the Yellowstone volcano than scientists believe. But that doesn't translate to imminent danger.
Roofs fly off like paper, huge trees are yanked from the ground, power lines snap and leave neighborhoods in the dark. Streets flood like rivers, homes are left in ruins. That's a hurricane passing through. After the wind calms down, the real mess begins. People stranded, no clean water, destroyed roads. Storms have been picking up for like 5,700 years. And the scariest part is that in the last 20 years, there's been a huge spike. But let's start from the very beginning. This is Belize, a small country on the northeastern coast of Central America. And this is the Great Blue Hole, a huge, deep underwater sinkhole about 410 feet deep and approximately 50 miles off the coast of Belize. It formed around 10,000 years ago, when the sea levels rose after the last ice age. A team of scientists arrived in Central America to study mud from way down in the Great Blue. They pulled out a long sample of sediment, which is basically layers of stuff that's settled over time. You might ask, so what? How are tropical storms connected with this sediment? Let's see. Tropical cyclones are big, spinning storms that form over warm ocean water. They pull up heat from the sea and blast it into the sky. And yeah, they can be devastatingly destructive, with super strong winds, heavy rain, and floods from big waves. And mud cores like the one the researchers pulled up are actually records of tropical storms. The sample they pulled up was 98 feet long, which made it the longest ever found in that area. Here's how it works. Every year, 2 thin layers of sediment settle in the hole where the weather is calm. But when a big storm hits, it leaves behind a different, messier layer. So by looking at these layers, scientists could tell how many storms hit that spot over the last 5,700 years. It's like counting tree rings, you know? Anyway, what they found was rather unexpected. It turns out that tropical cyclones had been getting more and more common. The lead researcher said that over the past 6,000 years, there were usually between 4 and 16 tropical storms or hurricanes every 100 years. But just in the last 20 years alone, they found signs of 9 storms in that same little area. That's way more than usual, and it shows how much things are changing. Scientists think there are 2 main reasons why tropical storms have been happening more often. One reason has to do with something called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ. This is an area near the equator where winds from the north and south come together. That spot has low air pressure, lots of moisture, and tons of thunderstorms. Just above it is the part of the Atlantic Ocean where most hurricanes are born. It even has an official name, the Hurricane Main Development Region. Normally, the ITCZ moves north in the summer and south in the winter because of changes in ocean temperatures. But over the past few thousand years, it's slowly been shifting farther and farther south. That's why the area where storms usually start has also moved south. It means storms are now forming and heading toward lower parts of the Atlantic than they used to. The second reason for the recent spike in storms is rising ocean temperatures. Earth has gotten warmer, and the ocean has warmed up too. The warm oceans help make more powerful storms. Such an increase likely means that this part of the world might see a lot more big storms in the future. If things keep going the way they are, scientists think the Caribbean could get hit by as many as 45 tropical storms and hurricanes by the end of this century. That's way more than anything the world has experienced in the last 5,700 years. There are just too many changes in the world that influence the situation. They create the perfect conditions for more storms to form and get really intense really fast. But if you think storms are getting more intense only over the ocean, let me tell you about America. A bunch of really dangerous storms, including tornadoes, dust storms, and wildfires, tore through several states in the Midwest and south of the USA in March 2025. At least 42 people lost their lives, and the scale of the devastation is enormous. What's scary is that most of this destruction didn't happen in the usual Tornado Alley area. Tornado Alley is a nickname for a part of the US where tornadoes happen a lot. It stretches through places like northern Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, parts of Louisiana, Iowa, Nebraska, and even eastern Colorado. But this time, storms hit places like Mississippi, Arkansas, and Alabama. Experts had warned this might happen. At the beginning of 2025, they said that tornadoes could start showing up more often farther east than usual, and that's exactly what's happening. One of their top weather experts said people in the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys should get ready for a rough spring. There are more people living in these areas than in traditional tornado zones, and many of them live in mobile homes or buildings without basements, which puts them at more risk when big storms hit. A tornado is basically a spinning tube of super strong wind that comes down from storm clouds and touches the ground. They can be really dangerous. To figure out how strong a tornado is, scientists use something called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. It goes from EF0, which stands for the weakest tornado, to EF5. Such a tornado is crazy strong, tear your house apart strong. The main question is, why are tornadoes happening more in the east now? In the US, tornado season usually kicks off in March. That's when cold air from Canada bumps into warm, wet air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. And boom, storms start to form. But this year, things are a bit different. Here's what's going on. There's a big patch of high pressure, basically a chunk of calm, warm air hanging over the southwest. That's keeping things more stable out west, so fewer thunderstorms as well as fewer tornadoes are expected there. So, tornadoes are shifting eastward. Meanwhile, the Gulf of Mexico is super warm this year, and that's helping storms form in the southeastern US. The warm water adds a lot of energy to the atmosphere, which can lead to stronger, more frequent storms in places like Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Up north, around the Great Lakes and Northeast, it's staying cooler this spring. That means fewer big storms up there, at least for now. Now, let's get back to those devastating March storms. On March 14 and 15, a huge storm system blasted through parts of the central and southern US. This system brought 52 confirmed tornadoes, massive dust storms, and fast-moving wildfires. It all led to almost 1,100 canceled flights. About 150 million people were affected by this natural disaster. Two really strong tornadoes classified as EF4s hit Arkansas. The damage was incredible. One of those tornadoes, which hit a town called Diaz, had winds up to 190 miles per hour. That's insanely fast. For comparison, the average speed of a Formula One car is around 130 to 160 miles per hour. It was the first time in over 25 years that Arkansas got hit by two EF4s on the same day. Experts also recorded wind gusts moving at a speed of over 80 miles per hour in the southern plains. In Texas, dust storms led to fatal car crashes. Wildfires, caused and driven by the strong winds, burned through parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma alone had more than 130 fires. So, what's next? Experts think the U.S. could see between 1,300 and 1,450 tornadoes in 2025. That's way more than the usual 1,225. And it's not just about tornadoes. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means heavier rains, more flash floods, and even more powerful storms. Basically, the formula is the following. Warmer oceans plus warmer air equals stormy weather, especially in the east and southeast. But even if you don't live in any of these areas, you can't feel completely at ease either. Experts say tornadoes and other natural disasters can happen pretty much anywhere in the U.S. The risk moves around depending on the time of year and the weather.
Okay, it's pop quiz time. What's the strongest river in the world? The Amazon? Pfft, rookie guess. No, really. The mightiest river isn't on land at all. It's underwater, and it's called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, or ACC for friends. This beast flows with a force 100 times stronger than the Amazon River, and it could power over 100,000 hydroelectric plants. That's enough electricity to light up entire continents. But this underwater juggernaut doesn't just flex its muscles for fun. It's the planet's ultimate multitasker. The ACC is Earth's thermostat, carbon vacuum, climate stabilizer, and oceanic superhighway all rolled into one. But here's the not-so-fun part. Scientists have spotted a serious red flag. The ACC is slowing down. And not just by a little bit. We're talking up to 20% weaker by 2050. If this trend continues, we're looking at climate chaos that could make your worst Monday feel like a day at the spa. So, maybe time to panic a little? Well, hold on. So what is the ACC anyways? To learn more about it, we need to dive deep into the ocean, figuratively. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current is the only ocean current that flows all the way around the planet, hugging the cold continent of Antarctica like a belt of water. Unlike other currents that get tripped up by continents, the ACC has a clear racetrack, nothing but open ocean, so it flows uninterrupted through the Drake Passage between South America and Antarctica. It moves an astonishing 3.6 billion cubic feet of water per second. That's so much water we couldn't find anything to compare it to, sorry. The ACC is driven by ferocious westerly winds, moving eastward to connect the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans into one continuous supercurrent. It also plunges into abyssal depths, connecting shallow, intermediate, and deep waters into one giant, swirling blender of oceanic energy. Now, to put it simply, maybe too late for that, but I'll try, the ACC is the glue that is keeping all of our planet together. It plays a starring role in the thermohaline circulation, or global conveyor belt, if you don't want to sound lame. This is the system that redistributes heat, carbon, and nutrients around the globe. To make it all work, the ACC pushes nutrient-rich deep water to the surface in a process called upwelling, feeding plankton, krill, whales, and eventually sushi on your plate. That means if you love seafood or care about ocean food chains at all, you should really start paying attention. Without this nutrient cycling, marine life from the bottom to the top of the food web suffers. Now, here's the cool part. While it's busy playing waiter to the sea, the ACC is also doing our laundry. Well, sort of. It absorbs massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and stores it in the deep ocean, locking it away for centuries. Think of it like Earth's giant carbon vault, no password required. It also helps regulate the weather. Without the ACC pushing heat around the globe, Western Europe would be 50 degrees colder. That means Paris would feel like Siberia, and Londoners would have to trade their umbrellas for snowshoes. The current helps maintain the temperature balance between the hemispheres, stabilizing wind patterns, rainfall, and ocean temperatures around the world. Even hurricane patterns could change because warm ocean surfaces are a key ingredient for cyclone formation. Mess with the currents, and you might be dialing up stronger, weirder storms. So, why is it slowing down? Well, of course, the answer is humans. You know those ice caps that are melting? Well, in Antarctica, where our friend the ACC lives, there's so much ice that if all of it melted, the Earth would rise more than 200 feet. That's taller than Cinderella's castle. What's worse, 60% of all the fresh water in the world is frozen in that ice. While that much water melting is already terrifying, it's the freshness of the water that really messes things up. You see, the ACC relies on the Southern Ocean's cold, salty water to be dense and heavy so it can sink, which helps power the current forward like a chain reaction. But when fresh water from melting glaciers pours into the ocean, it dilutes the saltiness. That makes the water less dense, so it stops sinking properly. Without that sink and flush mechanism, the ACC can't maintain its powerful flow. It's like trying to flush a toilet with no gravity. As this continues, fresh water flows north, altering the ocean's density structure and counteracting the effects of ocean warming, which normally would speed the current up. Instead, the ACC slows down. A weaker ACC means less upwelling, so fewer nutrients reach the surface. This could devastate Antarctic marine ecosystems, reducing biodiversity, collapsing fisheries, and threatening species like penguins, whales, and krill. It also opens the door in Antarctica to invasive species, like the southern bull kelp, which could throw entire food chains into chaos. Krill alone are the main food source for whales, seals, penguins, and fish. So when krill populations crash, the whole system begins to wobble like a house of cards in a hurricane. And then there's the feedback loop from hell. As the ACC weakens, more warm water can sneak southward, reaching Antarctica and melting the ice even faster. That melting will dump more fresh water into the ocean, which will weaken the current even more, which will melt more ice, and you get the idea. It's a vicious cycle. Worse still, warm waters underneath ice shelves can cause them to break apart from below, meaning the melting accelerates even when surface temperatures seem stable. Globally, the effects would ripple far and wide. Monsoons in India could become erratic, rainfall in the Amazon could drop, and agriculture from Africa to Asia could suffer. Sea levels along the east coast of North America could surge, and global weather patterns could spin into confusion. Even the Southern Ocean's ability to support commercial fisheries, like Chile's lucrative salmon industry, could decline as nutrients fail to reach the surface. And let's not forget, without a strong ACC, the ocean's ability to absorb carbon and excess heat plummets. That means that more CO2 and heat will stay in the atmosphere, making our lives even more miserable. It's like turning off Earth's air conditioner while cranking up the furnace, and burning down the pantry while you're at it. Of course, this isn't the first time things went south with the ocean currents. Before humans started heating up the planet, Earth went through a deep freeze called the Little Ice Age, and it wasn't just about colder winters. This icy chapter may have kicked off when ocean currents in the North Atlantic started acting weird. And it wasn't so long ago. This Little Ice Age had a peak in 1850, literally yesterday. Scientists believe that melting glaciers and massive exports of Arctic sea ice flooded the ocean with fresh water. That fresh water messed with the ocean's usual saltiness and density, weakening powerful systems like the AMOC, short for Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. That's a mouthful. It's another crucial piece of the global conveyor belt puzzle. As these currents slowed down, less warm water reached the north, sea ice spread farther, and temperatures dropped even more. And here's the spooky part. Records from seashells near Iceland show that this shift didn't happen all at once. It came in two waves, like the planet was struggling to stay stable before tipping into a colder world. And because the AMOC is also part of the crazy life support system of planet Earth, everything is connected. Both systems are influenced by temperature, salinity, and the sinking of cold water. When the ACC slows, it can alter the balance of deep water formation and mixing, potentially weakening the AMOC too. That's a domino effect you really don't want to see. In fact, some models suggest that if both the ACC and AMOC are pushed past their tipping points, the result could be centuries of unstable climate conditions, way beyond anything modern agriculture or infrastructure is built to handle. So, next time you're sipping a cold drink or enjoying sushi, maybe raise a toast to the mighty ACC. It's doing a lot more for you than you think, and it could really use a little appreciation and less ice melting, please. Do you know that our planet has scars? One of them is located in North America. This scar can tell us many cool things about the history of Earth, but the most interesting thing is that it could change the appearance of our continents and break our world. But for some reason, this scar hasn't done it yet. And that's not even the most interesting part. The coolest thing about this scar is that it might hold a giant source of clean, cheap energy. So let's go to Kansas to find out what it is. So, 1.1 billion years ago, a giant rift formed in the crust of our planet on the territory of the modern U.S. Midwest. It's called Broken Heart. This giant crevice is filled with solidified magma, and from afar, it looks like a real scar. But how did it show up? Broken Heart was an ancient rift valley, a huge geological fault forming elongated hollows in the Earth's crust. It occurred because tectonic plates had moved apart. It's like the details of a jigsaw puzzle that suddenly started to separate. At that moment, thousands and even millions of tons of magma spilled out from the depths of our planet. That event looked like a real apocalypse, lasting about 100,000 years. But then it stopped, and scientists don't know why. If the rifting process had lasted longer, then most likely, the continent of North America would look different today, or it wouldn't even exist at all. Right now, this fault looks like a giant horseshoe that stretches from Kansas north to Lake Superior and south to Michigan. But some studies indicate that the fault may be larger and extend even further south, and the width of the fault might equal the width of the Red Sea. After the rifting stopped, the entire valley got covered with hills and trees. The fault itself is covered with a thick layer of sedimentary rocks, so it's quite difficult to track. The most noticeable parts of the rift are in the Lake Superior area. Now everything looks calm and beautiful, but in the past, there were fountains and rivers of lava, earthquakes, a boiling pot on a planetary scale. All that remains of it are deposits of basalt, a dark, dense rock that forms from cooled lava. There was so much basalt that its weight pushed the valley deeper and deeper into the Earth's crust. Even when the eruptions and rifting stopped, the valley continued to sink because of the huge mass of this sediment. Then, massive sections of the Earth's crust on both sides of the valley began to contract, and the pieces of the puzzle slowly started to come together. This led to a large-scale ejection of volcanic material upward, and along with basalt, deposits of copper rock appeared in the valley. People mined this copper for about 8,000 years until the end of the 20th century. The copper mines were eventually shut down, but now it seems the industry is making a comeback. However, Broken Heart is not interesting to people just because of its copper reserves. It holds something more valuable and useful for our civilization. Scientists believe that this valley hides massive reserves of hydrogen, and this substance can help us switch to a cleaner, cheaper, and more efficient energy source. If hydrogen fuel becomes widely available, everyone will switch to it, leaving behind the costly, noisy, and polluting process of oil production. Now, I'll bet hydrogen is a remarkably familiar word to you. It doesn't sound like the discovery of the century, and people have been using it for a long time. On one hand, you're right, but not quite. 90% of the hydrogen produced by humans is used as a raw material for the chemical industry. Hydrogen is used to produce ammonia for fertilizers, methanol for fuel and solvents, and to purify crude oil. Manufacturers of glass, cement, steel, and other metals are considering using hydrogen at their factories for more efficient production. Hydrogen can become an alternative to fossil fuels, that is, oil and gasoline produced from them. Cars, ships, trains, airplanes, and power plants, all of these may switch to hydrogen soon. In this case, production can become cheaper and better for nature. But this will work only if we find open sources of hydrogen. You see, about 95% of the hydrogen we use is produced from fossil fuels. We gasify coal, oxidize hydrocarbons, and extract hydrogen from methane. All of these production methods require energy. But the worst part is that they lead to large emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But what if we find sources of pure hydrogen that don't require processing? Then we'll save energy for its production and make the planet cleaner. But where can we find such sources? Scientists say that there are many of them all over the planet, and one of the largest is located in the Rift Valley in the U.S. Midwest. But what's the problem with going and mining it? Well, it's not that simple. To extract pure hydrogen, you need 3 conditions. The first is the source of hydrogen itself, which is quite logical. The second is reservoir rocks, that is, natural containers where this hydrogen is stored. And the third is natural seals, which prevent the gas from escaping. In other words, these seals work like a cap on a bottle. They don't allow the substance to escape. So in general, it's necessary to find where hydrogen is released, where it accumulates, and where it's stored. When these conditions are met, natural resource extraction companies can start working. But how does hydrogen appear altogether? Well, let's go over the basics of chemistry. Hydrogen and oxygen compounds form water. This means you need to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. This process often occurs in nature. There are many places all over the planet where this happens. Scientists are confident that at least 30 U.S. states have hydrogen reservoirs. And if people detect them, we will accelerate the energy transition to safer and more efficient fuels. Thousands of cars drive around using gasoline. Many of you know the smell of exhaust fumes, that thick polluted air that's hard to breathe. What about electric cars? They must be improving the situation, right? Well, here's another problem. Producing batteries for these vehicles harms nature. The materials used to make batteries are lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Their extraction involves a large release of toxic materials, not only into the air but also into the water. Transporting these batteries also creates a large carbon footprint. Producing a single electric car emits about 4 tons of carbon dioxide. To make up for that, the owner needs to drive it for at least 8 years. That's how long it takes to offset the emissions a regular car would produce. What about reliability and convenience? What will you do if the battery runs out during the trip and there are no charging stations nearby? This problem will be solved in the future with the growing popularity of electric cars. Now, scientists believe that over the past billion years, the Earth's crust has split enough water into hydrogen and oxygen. Our planet keeps this gas in the ground, waiting for us to start using it. According to calculations, even considering all the technologies and production capacities of our civilization, the reserves of hydrogen in the bowels of the planet are enough to supply us with energy for 170,000 years. That's why the giant rift in Kansas attracts scientists from all over the world. Huge quantities of basalt and other rocks can react with water to release hydrogen. And now scientists are looking for places where this material accumulates and is stored.
The floor is lava. Haha, just kidding. But honestly, it's kind of falling apart. You might not feel it yet, but a huge part of North America has already lost 37 miles worth of rock from its foundation. And no, this isn't about earthquakes or giant sinkholes. It's about the continent losing pieces of the very thing that keeps the ground from wobbling around like a bad carnival ride. A team of researchers has just dropped a geological bombshell. Part of North America's ground is thinning out like a very sad, very slow ice cream drip. How do they know? They basically gave Earth a high-tech full-body MRI and created 3D maps showing how rocks once considered indestructible are now melting away into the planet's guts, like an upside-down cheese pizza inside an oven. But to really understand this mess, you first have to meet my old friends, cratons. Cratons are like the roots of the continents. They're thick, tough, and ancient. We're talking billions of years old. These bad boys survived meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, and even the tectonic movement of plates. If the plates got into fistfights, for example, you can bet we would see mountain ranges being born. If they got a divorce, drifting apart from each other, then a whole new ocean would be born. All of these things leave scars on the surface of Earth, but the cratons seem to always remain unfazed, like the cockroaches of geology. And since a craton can basically get punched in the face and feel nothing, scientists always assumed these things were nearly indestructible. But then, a group of researchers took their fancy machines to the test and realized that, wait, the cratons are falling apart? How? Enter the Farallon Plate, a really ancient tectonic plate that started to slide under North America's major plate over 100 million years ago. This is a pretty normal process, actually. It's called subduction, and it's how Earth recycles rocks and keeps itself from overheating. This subduction thing has been happening for so long that, by now, the Farallon is almost 400 miles away from the craton, sitting pretty chill at the lower mantle, weirdly close to the outer core of our planet. But the Farallon has been causing trouble, like that one roommate who moved out but keeps leaving weird stuff in the fridge. You see, as it sinks, it tugs on the bottom of North America's foundation, stretching it out and causing pieces to fall off into the deep mantle. And if that wasn't enough drama, the sinking Farallon has also leaked water and carbon dioxide into the surrounding rocks, making the craton even softer and easier to shred apart. Thanks, Farallon. Very cool of you. By studying hundreds of earthquakes across thousands of monitoring stations, scientists have confirmed the story. Big chunks of continental material are dripping downward, thinning the craton by as much as 37 miles. That's more missing rocks than can fit into a milk carton. Sounds dramatic, right? But don't worry. This is happening at a snail's pace. It'll take millions of years for anything noticeable to happen. Your great-great-great-great few grandkids from the distant future might still be standing on solid ground. But don't get too comfy. This thing may not be an urgent problem, but there's another type of sinking that's happening faster than you can say, "Help!" Here's the thing. By 2050, at least 32 major cities in the US, including New York, Baltimore, and Charleston, could be partially underwater. And guess what? This one is mostly our fault. Scientists noticed that since 2007, some cities have been sinking into the ground between 0.04 and 0.08 inches every year. Charleston, in South Carolina, is pulling ahead in the worst way possible, sinking 0.15 inches annually. Sure, these numbers sound tiny and a bit ridiculous, but Charleston is barely 9 feet above sea level, and a little sinking goes a long way when the ocean is breathing down your neck. On really bad flood days, people there have to abandon their cars and basically swim home. This whole phenomenon is called land subsidence, and when you mix sinking land with rising sea levels, you get a disaster cocktail of flooded streets, salty farmland, ghost forests, and a lot of very cranky homeowners. And it doesn't stop with just homes. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, airports, and power plants, all things we rely on daily, are also at risk of serious damage. Flooded electrical grids and sunken highways could cause billions more in economic losses and create major safety hazards for communities. Now, let's be fair. Not everything is humanity's fault. Some of this trouble dates all the way back to the Ice Age. About 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets covered the northern US. They were heavy, like seriously heavy. The weight pushed the land down, and when the ice melted, the ground didn't just pop back up like a trampoline. Instead, it started playing a weird game of geological seesaw. The places that were squished started rising, and the places that weren't got pulled down. This whole process, called glacial isostatic adjustment, try to say that 3 times fast. But of course, humans found a way to make it worse. Groundwater extraction is a major culprit. Think of it like pulling the stuff out of the mattress. After a while, the whole thing just sags. In places like California's Central Valley, the land is dropping by up to 8 inches a year because we keep pumping out water during droughts. In cities like New York, the problem isn't just water. Skyscrapers themselves are making it worse. Yep, turns out if you stack millions of tons of concrete and steel onto soft ground, it tends to flatten. And in case you're wondering, the total mass of New York City's buildings is around 1.68 trillion pounds. That's about the same as 3.5 million statues of liberty piled up. With so much weight concentrated over a relatively small area, the underlying soils have no choice but to compress over time. And if you thought it couldn't get messier, think again. We've been building dams, which stop rivers from delivering fresh sediment to coastal areas. That sediment is kind of like Mother Nature's way of fluffing the ground back up. Without it, coastal lands are compacting like an old sponge. Plus, when wetlands are drained for agriculture or construction, the peaty soil dries out and collapses. Honestly, it's like the ground just can't catch a break. Scientists also noticed that the areas that used to be lush wetlands are now among the fastest sinking spots in the country, especially along the Gulf Coast. Louisiana, for example, is losing about a football field of land because of this mix of subsidence and rising seas. So what's the endgame here for us regular people who just want to live above sea level? Well, it's not looking great. Ghost forests, which are basically drowned woodlands, are popping up. Farmland is turning salty and unusable. And even sunny day flooding, where streets flood without any rain, is becoming a thing. Yikes! Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California is not exactly winning either. San Francisco and Los Angeles are both sinking, which means that rising sea levels could hit them twice as hard and twice as fast. In some places like the Palos Verdes Peninsula, the ground has been sinking so fast, people over there might as well live like moles. So, is America turning into the next Atlantis? Probably not next week, but without serious action, like cutting back on groundwater pumping and planning smarter cities, at least 500,000 people are in serious danger. And the housing damage could easily rack up a jaw-dropping $109 billion by 2050. In the end, while North America isn't about to sink like a poorly made souffle, it's definitely showing some cracks in the crust. So maybe let's ease up on groundwater pumping, rethink how and where we build, and invest a little more in keeping our feet dry. After all, if the floor really does become lava someday, we're gonna wish we had at least fixed the leaks first.
Imagine standing in a quiet northern town, surrounded by mountains and forests, when the ground beneath your feet suddenly shifts with the force of a freight train. That's not a movie scene. It's a very real possibility for the people living in Dawson City, Canada. Hidden beneath the tranquil Yukon landscape lies a geological giant, the Tintina Fault. For more than 12,000 years, it has been silent, but new research suggests it might be ready to wake up in a spectacular and dangerous way. Stretching over 1,000 kilometers from the Yukon into Alaska, the Tintina Fault is like a massive crack in Earth's crust, a boundary where colossal slabs of rock slowly grind past each other. On the surface, it looks harmless, just rugged terrain, rivers, and forests. But deep underground, strain is quietly building, like a spring being wound tighter and tighter. Theron Findlay, a geologist from the University of Victoria, and his team decided to take a closer look at a section of this fault near Dawson City. This wasn't just a casual inspection. They used cutting-edge tools like high-resolution satellite images, aerial surveys, and LiDAR, a laser-based scanning method that can reveal subtle changes in the ground's shape. What they found was unsettling. In one location, the ground was visibly displaced by an astonishing 1,000 meters, evidence of a long series of powerful earthquakes millions of years ago. In another area, they spotted a smaller but still significant offset of about 75 meters, likely caused by more recent quakes, roughly 132,000 years ago. Since then, nothing major. At least, nothing visible. And that's exactly the problem. When a fault line hasn't released energy for thousands of years, it doesn't mean it's safe. Quite the opposite. It could mean that massive pressure has been silently accumulating. Based on their calculations, the Tintina fault has been moving at a slow creep of up to 0.8 millimeters per year. Over 12,000 years, that adds up to a staggering 6 meters of potential movement waiting to be unleashed. If that strain were to suddenly break free, the resulting earthquake could be bigger than magnitude 7.5. For context, that's in the same league as some of the most destructive quakes in history, like the 1976 Tangshan earthquake in China, or the 2010 Haiti disaster. While the Yukon isn't densely populated, the impact could still be devastating, damaging highways, collapsed buildings, landslides cutting off communities, and potentially loss of life. The scientists can't say when it will happen. Earthquakes don't work on a schedule, and predicting the exact moment of rupture is one of geology's greatest challenges. What they do know is that the Tintina fault is in what's called a late stage of its seismic cycle, a point where the risk of a major quake is higher. For the people of Dawson City and surrounding areas, this means living with a quiet but ever-present threat. Emergency planners might advise residents to have evacuation routes, survival kits, and backup communication plans. But in the end, this is a reminder of a simple truth. Earth is never truly still. Even in the most peaceful landscapes, immense forces are always at work, reshaping the planet in ways we can't always see, until the day they reveal themselves with a violent jolt. Yet, the story of the Tintina fault is more than a warning. It's a glimpse into how Earth stores and releases its pent-up energy. Each millimeter of annual movement is like another twist of a key in a lock. At some point, the lock will turn, and when it does, the release will be sudden and powerful. LiDAR images reveal ancient scars across the land, subtle to the untrained eye, but obvious to scientists. These are the footprints of past disasters, frozen in the ground like a history book carved by nature. Finley and his colleagues believe the region's seismic silence has lulled people into a false sense of security. A place can be both beautiful and dangerous, and the Yukon is a perfect example. Visitors come for the sweeping vistas and endless wilderness, rarely realizing that deep beneath their hiking trails and scenic roads, forces are shifting that could change the landscape overnight. This hidden drama plays out all over the world. Fault lines in California, Turkey, Japan, and beyond all share one trait. They eventually break. The question is never if, but when. The Tintina fault just happens to be one of the quieter players, which in geological terms can be far more ominous than the noisy ones. And so, the clock ticks, silently, in the frozen north, counting down to a moment no one can see coming.
So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas fault line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something that can cause more damage than the big one. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works. because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put 2 and 2 together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed, but Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe.
On January 26, 1700, one of the biggest earthquakes in history hit off the coast of the United States. It had a magnitude of 9, which puts it in the top 10 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This earthquake triggered a huge tsunami and changed the coastline all the way from southern British Columbia down to northern California forever. Back then, the area wasn't very populated, but thanks to some clever research, scientists figured out exactly what happened that day by looking at old geological records, tree rings, and even some history from Japan. On the same day as the earthquake, a massive tsunami also hit Japan's eastern coast. For a long time, no one connected the two, but in the 1980s and 90s, researchers realized the tsunami in Japan had been caused by the earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. They were also able to pinpoint the exact day, January 26, 1700. They even found old trees in coastal Washington that had all perished around the winter of 1700, which matched up perfectly with the timing of the earthquake. The earthquake came from the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. This fault stretches about 700 miles, from northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia to Cape Mendocino in California. The pressure from the moving plates builds up over time, and eventually, another big, devastating earthquake will hit the same region. It's just a matter of time. By looking at the geological records, past tsunami deposits, and signs of land level changes, scientists can figure out how often these huge earthquakes happen. Emergency planners have been preparing for the next big quake, often calling it the big one. Scientists believe earthquakes in the Cascadia subduction zone happen every 200 to 1,000 years, and since the last major one was over 300 years ago, the Pacific Northwest is definitely due for another. When it happens, the earthquake is expected to be as big as the one from 1700, but this time, it'll affect around 15 million people. The devastation will be severe. Buildings will collapse, roads and runways will crack, and bridges will fall. Communication in and out of the area will be cut off. But the worst part? The earthquake will trigger a massive tsunami that might hit parts of the Washington coast in as little as 10 minutes.
It's not a matter of if, but when the Cascadia subduction zone will break. When it happens, it will be the worst disaster the US has ever faced. Worse than the Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy. It'll impact an enormous area, stretching from southern British Columbia all the way down through Oregon to northern California. That means millions and millions of people will be affected. Fairchild is considered a backup staging area for handling the aftermath of the earthquake, with Grant County International Airport in Moses Lake being the main one. For those who will survive the initial quake and tsunami, the aftermath could be just as disastrous. Aftershocks will follow, and transportation will be a mess. Roads will be damaged or completely blocked, airports will shut down, and most of the main routes, like Interstate 5, will have bridges destroyed. This means food and water supplies will be cut off, and it will be incredibly difficult for help to get in or for people to escape. Gas pipelines will most likely be damaged too, and restoring them could take anywhere from a few days inland to weeks or even months along the coast. Power outages will be widespread within 100 miles of the coast throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. And water could be out for 3 to 7 months. Even telecommunications will be down for 2 to 3 months across the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and even parts of East Asia. The good news for eastern Washington is that it will mostly avoid the worst of it, thanks to natural barriers between the west and east sides of the state. The tsunami may hit the Columbia River Gorge, but it will lose energy quickly because of a sandbar under the river. The Cascade Mountains will absorb much of the earthquake's impact, so the east side won't feel it as strongly. And since eastern Washington won't get hit as hard, it'll be up to them to handle the aftermath of the quake. That means helping western Washington, taking in refugees from the areas that got destroyed, and delivering supplies to where they're needed. Scientists have looked at other major 8.0 to 9.0 magnitude earthquakes like the ones in Chile in 1960, Alaska in 1964, and Sumatra in 2004, and Japan in 2011. These kinds of quakes can shake the ground for anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time for the ground to be shaking. Such quakes are super intense because they happen close to Earth's surface, so it's not just a quick shake, it's a long, strong one that can cause a lot of damage. If the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami were to hit tomorrow, over 13,800 people could lose their lives, and about 107,000 people could be injured. The economic toll in Washington, Oregon, and California could top $70 billion. To put that into perspective, we can compare these numbers with some other major earthquakes. In Chile's 1960 earthquake, about 1,650 people lost their lives. The 1964 Alaska quake resulted in around 140 lives lost. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami took the lives of an estimated 280,000 people. And the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami caused over 20,000 casualties. Authorities know about the dangers of the Cascadia fault, but even with all the planning, no one can say for sure what will be needed when the big quake hits. Right after the earthquake and tsunami, the areas outside the immediate disaster zone won't be able to help much because roads and airports will be destroyed, and resources will be limited. How can we deal with this kind of disaster and its effects? We don't have all the answers yet. Right now, let's focus on the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a huge fault line that stretches about 620 miles from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino in California, sitting about 93 miles off the coast. It's like one tectonic plate is slowly sliding under another. When the plates are close to the surface, about 18 miles deep or less, they get stuck because of friction, kind of like pushing two rocks together. Over time, this creates a lot of pressure. When the pressure finally becomes too much, the plates slip, causing a massive earthquake. This is called a megathrust earthquake, and it can be huge. Below the area where the plates are stuck, there's a zone where the plates move really slowly. We're talking about just a few inches every few months. This slow movement helps to release some of the pressure, but it also builds up more pressure on the parts of the fault that are still stuck. This means that over time, it increases the chances of a huge earthquake happening. These massive quakes, called Great Subduction Zone earthquakes, can be stronger than magnitude 8.5. Megathrust earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes that happen. They can go over a magnitude of 9.0, which is insanely powerful. Just to put it in perspective, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a 7.0 and 1,000,000 times more energy than a 5.0. These earthquakes happen when a lot of pressure builds up in a part of the fault that's locked, which means the plate can't move past each other. When that pressure gets too high, the fault finally ruptures, releasing all that built-up energy in one massive shake. The Cascadia subduction zone is super long. That's why if it were to rupture all at once, it could produce a large earthquake. Scientists have studied this region and found that about 18 miles below the surface, the fault is completely locked. The plates there aren't sliding past each other. But deeper down, the plates start to slide more smoothly, causing less friction. This is important because it tells us how much stress is building up in that locked zone, and how it could eventually lead to a major earthquake.
Around 2,500 years ago, an earthquake completely changed the course of one of the largest and most famous rivers on the planet, the Ganges. Now, it's normal for rivers not to sit in one place, so if you live next to one, it could also just disappear without a trace or flood the whole city one day. In the case of the Ganges River, a supermassive earthquake became the reason for this dramatic change. Scientists say it might happen again, and it would be a huge problem for millions of people who depend on this river. The Ganges River starts as small streams in the Himalayas and travels a long way, over 1,500 miles. Along its journey, it meets other big rivers before all the water flows into the Bay of Bengal. The Ganges has the largest delta in the world among all rivers. Just like many other rivers in the region, it slowly changes its path over time. These changes, if they happen when a river wears away its banks, usually takes a long time, sometimes decades. Scientists have discovered that the Ganges-Brahmaputra river system has shifted several times over the last 6,000 years. When they looked at satellite images of the Ganges Delta, they noticed something interesting. There was a crescent-shaped dip in the ground about 28 miles away from where the river is flowing now. This depression was over 1 mile wide and stretched for many miles. They thought it might have been an old main channel of the Ganges River a long time ago. In 2018, the team decided to visit the area to check it out for themselves and take samples to learn more about it. While driving back home, they noticed a pit where someone was digging dirt to create a pond. The next day, they planned to fill it with water, but the researchers spotted something strange in the dirt. There were vertical bands of light-colored sand mixed into the darker mud. These special layers are clues from the past. They show that an ancient earthquake made sand and water shoot up from below the ground and created sand volcanoes that were trapped in time. The scientists studied the sand and mud and figured out that these earthquakes happened around 2,500 years ago and were strong, with magnitudes of 7 to 8. The epicenter was over 110 miles away from the main stem of the river, but it was powerful enough to displace it. It could have affected around 140 million people. The Ganges-Brahmaputra system is close to spots where Earth's tectonic plates meet, so earthquakes happen here often. There's no danger right now, but scientists think that another massive earthquake could happen in the next few hundred or thousand years. It could threaten up to 170 million people. That's about half the population of the U.S. No one can predict exactly when an earthquake will happen or how strong it will be. Learning how earthquakes in the past moved rivers helps scientists figure out patterns and make guesses about similar events in the future. This knowledge could help us prepare better and create safety plans before another big earthquake strikes. Now, the Ganges isn't the only river at risk. The Yellow River, the Irrawaddy River, and rivers in the United States like the Klamath and San Joaquin all face similar dangers. The mighty Mississippi River has also switched its path many times over the last 7,000 years. Right now, there's a huge system of dams and barriers called a control structure in central Louisiana. This structure's job is to stop the Mississippi from spilling over its banks and joining a nearby river. But scientists think that, in theory, these barriers wouldn't handle mega floods. So the Mississippi could break free and change its course again. This would cause massive problems, especially in southern Louisiana. One of the recent examples when a river changing its course caused disaster was the Kosi River in India. In August 2008, over just a few days, the river's path shifted by almost 60 miles, which is a huge change. Floods happen in some parts of the state rather often, but they hadn't seen such strong ones in over 50 years. They affected around 1,000 villages and 3 million people, and about 1 million people had to be evacuated to safety. Since many of these people hadn't faced floods in so long, they weren't ready to handle it quickly. It caused even more damage to their homes and lives. Scientists have been trying for decades to figure out what exactly makes rivers suddenly change their course. A new study explains that two things work together to make a river to do it. This process is called evulsion. First, there's the setup, which is like building up tension before something big happens. Over time, sediment, sand, dirt, and other stuff carried by the river gets deposited in certain places. It either raises the river above the land around it or makes a nearby slope steeper than the river's current path. Then there's the trigger, which is like the final straw that makes everything happen. This trigger could be a big flood, an earthquake, or even something like a pile of logs blocking the water. Now, researchers looked at satellite images of about 170 cases of evulsion from the past 50 years. They noticed these events happen most often near river mouths and near mountains. Rivers were about 3 times more likely to change course in these places than in the areas between them. They also studied 58 river channels in detail, using super clear maps to measure super elevation. That's how high the river is compared to the land around it. They also measured slope advantage. That's how steep a new path might be compared to the river's current one. They found that near mountains, rivers often pile up so much sediment that they become super elevated and spill over. But near river mouths, like in deltas, rivers need a steep slope advantage to break through the mud and form a new path. These two factors work together like a seesaw. If one is stronger, the other doesn't need to be as strong for an evulsion to happen. To figure out where a river might go if it changes course, the researchers created a smart computer algorithm. This tool uses maps to measure the terrain steepness and the river's flow to predict where the river might move. They tested it on 10 past evulsions, and it correctly guessed the path every single time. Scientists hope they could use these findings to protect people living near rivers from sudden floods. Rivers changing course played a big role in creating one of the first organized administration systems in the world. Scientists found clues for this in the territory of ancient Mesopotamia. This name means the land between two rivers, and it was between the rivers Tigris and the Euphrates. People living there relied on these rivers for water, food, and transportation. Scientists wanted to figure out how these sudden changes in these rivers affected ancient people. To do this, they used 2 kinds of maps. The archaeological maps show how ancient cities grew over time, including what types of buildings people built. Certain buildings, like big palaces or city walls, could show when each city first had an organized administration. The second kind of map showed where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed long ago. They often shifted, sometimes slowly, and sometimes very quickly and dramatically. Around the year 5000 BCE, Mesopotamia started to become drier, and farming became harder. Farmers had to grow their crops near rivers, where they could use the natural floods to water their fields or dig little channels to bring river water to their plants. Because farming was so important, towns and cities grew near the rivers too, so people could stay close to their food. But when a river suddenly changed its course, people didn't give up. They worked together to dig long canals to bring water from the new river path back to their fields. The canals helped them get water again, and the administration buildings showed they were organizing as a community to solve big problems together. Deep inside our planet, there are two massive blobs of rock that have puzzled scientists for years. They sit deep inside, opposite each other. One lurks under the Pacific Ocean, the other under Africa. And they're so weird, they even make seismic waves slow down. Their actual name is large low-velocity provinces, but they're just two enormous, mysterious blobs of rock, bigger than continents, stranger than anything else inside the Earth, and so dense they might be leftovers from another planet. Until recently, no one knew what they were, where they came from, or why they even exist. These mysterious blobs could hold the secret to Earth's deepest forces, powerful enough to shape earthquakes, drive volcanic eruptions, and even influence the evolution of life itself. And now, we might finally learn the truth about them. These geological monsters are hidden about 1,800 miles beneath the surface. Each one is 100 times taller than Mount Everest, so vast they defy explanation. Now, at first, scientists thought these were primordial remnants from Earth's early days. Maybe something giant smashed into Earth about 4.5 billion years ago, and this impact formed both the Moon and these blobs. Scientists believe it could have been a planet named Theia, a Mars-sized planet that existed somewhere around the asteroid belt and slammed into Earth back in the day. Others believe it could be something much more familiar, old chunks of Earth's crust. Perhaps they got pushed deep into the mantle by the movement of tectonic plates. And now, a new study shows that these blobs are massive piles of oceanic crust that have been sinking into the Earth for billions of years. They could have formed from the stuff that sinks into Earth when tectonic plates collide. Over 1 billion years, pieces of ocean crust could have been swallowed by the mantle. Eventually, they collected into two massive regions deep inside the planet. But even though both blobs form the same way, they aren't identical. There's this place called the Pacific Ring of Fire, a giant loop of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. Well, the Pacific blob doesn't just stop growing and changing because it's constantly being fed fresh rock from that place. Tectonic plates crash into each other, and one plate sinks beneath another, pushing old ocean crust deep into the Earth. Since this keeps happening, the Pacific blob is heavier, denser, and more active than its twin under Africa. It's like a giant hot rock factory, constantly getting new material and reshaping itself over time. The African blob is much older and quieter than the one under the Pacific. It doesn't get fresh rock pushed into it as often. That's why, over time, it has blended more with the surrounding mantle. Since it's less dense, it behaves differently. It rises higher into the Earth's mantle, stretching 340 miles closer to the surface. And that might be why Africa has so many powerful volcanoes and rift valleys today. The biggest question is, how do they keep evolving? Scientists think that huge columns of hot rock, called mantle plumes, might be pushing up from deep inside the Earth, helping to drive the movement of tectonic plates in the Pacific. If they're right, then these giant underground blobs aren't just sitting there. They're almost alive in a way. They'd be constantly changing and shaping the surface of our planet. But why do they even matter? Because these weird underground structures may be shaping Earth's surface in ways we don't fully understand yet. You see, first, they might influence Earth's magnetic field. That's because they affect how heat moves through the mantle and core. They might also hold clues about the history of plate tectonics. Studying them could help us figure out when subduction began on Earth, whether it was over 4 billion years ago or much more recently. These guys might also be secret puppet masters behind volcanic activity. There's a theory that blazing hot rock from deep inside the Earth, the same kind that creates volcanic hotspots, might be rising straight from the giant blobs in the mantle. Some of the biggest volcanoes on Earth, including those in Hawaii, Iceland, and Yellowstone, sit directly above the suspected rising plumes from these blobs. If these blobs are fueling these volcanoes, then they could be responsible for shaping Earth's continents, climate, and even mass extinctions throughout history. And well, that's horrifying. That would mean that these giant structures might burst through Earth's crust one day, unleashing catastrophic supervolcanic eruptions, and these eruptions would last for millions of years. Beneath the Earth's surface also lies monsters unlike anything else on this planet – supervolcanoes. They're so massive, so destructive, and so rare that no human has ever witnessed one erupt. A regular volcanic eruption can be terrifying. Lava spewing into the sky, ash choking the air, entire cities buried under fire and stone. But a supervolcano? Well, that's something else entirely. A supervolcano isn't just big, it's a category of its own. Their eruptions rip apart the Earth itself, creating massive craters called calderas. Some of them are over 30 miles wide. A regular volcanic eruption might spew out a few cubic miles of lava and ash. A supervolcano unleashes more than 240 cubic miles of material. That's enough to bury an entire continent in ash. An eruption like this would be newsworthy, to say the least. First, a wall of fire would blow up into the sky. Ash would block out the sun for years, dropping global temperatures. Entire countries could be buried under meters of ash, making farming impossible. Famine, extreme cold, and toxic air could wipe out entire civilizations. It wouldn't just be a local disaster, it would be global. In fact, two of the worst mass extinctions in Earth's history, where almost all life was wiped out, might have been caused by supervolcanoes, not asteroids. The biggest and most horrifying one was at the end of the Permian period. Literally, about 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species went poof. Scientists have counted about 20 supervolcanoes on Earth today. The most famous ones are Yellowstone in the US, Toba in Indonesia, and Topau in New Zealand. Now, the last time Yellowstone erupted was roughly 2 million years ago. It released almost 590 cubic miles of material, enough to bury a city like New York. That was just one of 3 Yellowstone supereruptions. The most recent supervolcano to erupt was Topau in New Zealand. This happened about 26,500 years ago. But supervolcanoes don't just destroy, they reshape the entire planet. About 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted in Indonesia. Some scientists believe it triggered a volcanic winter that lasted an entire decade. There are also theories that suggest that this eruption nearly wiped out early humans. It reduced their numbers to just a few thousand survivors, although that's just speculation. Either way, we know for sure that supervolcano eruptions have changed the course of history. So, how do we prepare for them if this could happen at any moment? Well, scientists monitor volcanoes constantly, looking for warning signs. It could be stuff like rising magma, ground swelling, earthquakes beneath a volcano, changes in gas emissions, and so on. The problem is that while we can predict short-term eruptions, the long-term ones are still a mystery. Yellowstone last erupted 630,000 years ago. It's literally overdue for another eruption already. But volcanoes don't work like clocks. Just because one erupted in the past doesn't mean it will definitely go wild again, and the time between eruptions could be random. Scientists think Yellowstone could erupt again, but it might be just a small lava flow instead of a super eruption. Are we ready for a super eruption if it happens? Probably not. Scientists say we're more prepared for an asteroid strike than a supervolcano eruption. When Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai erupted in 2022, it cut off communications, caused tsunamis, and filled the sky with ash. And that was only a magnitude 5 eruption. A supervolcano would be orders of magnitude worse. So, good luck sleeping at night knowing these guys will erupt again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in 100,000 years. Nah, don't lose sleep over it.
For hundreds of years, people in the US have reported hearing strange, loud booms. These mysterious sounds are called skyquakes. And yep, it's a real thing. If you've ever heard a loud, distant booming noise that definitely wasn't a thunderstorm or a car engine backfire, congrats, it looks like you've experienced a skyquake yourself. People report them all around the globe, from the US to India and Japan. They go under different names, and we still don't know why exactly they happen. Sometimes these booms come together with earthquakes. People heard them during the New Madrid earthquakes in the early 19th century and up until January 2020. Those who've experienced them describe skyquakes as a rushing or rolling noise. Famous American writer James Fenimore Cooper described it more poetically as the lake speaking to the surrounding hills, which send back the echoes of its voice in accurate reply. Sometimes these mysterious booms happen in cold weather instead of during earthquakes. One of the skyquake hotspots is near Lake Seneca in New York. They call them the Seneca Guns. The booms can be so loud that they shake windows and doors. Back in August 1886, after an earthquake in Charleston, people heard these noises for several weeks, happening at the same time as many aftershocks from the earthquake. In 2020, scientists from the University of North Carolina looked at old news pieces, especially from North Carolina, where people have often reported these sounds. They hoped to match the noises with earthquakes data, but they didn't find any link between the sounds and earthquakes. One of the researchers said they believe the noises are happening in the air, not underground. The team looked at infrasounds, which are low-frequency noises that humans can't hear. They found signals lasting 1 to 10 seconds that matched the times when people reported hearing the booms, but nothing is certain here. Some people think that solar flares, underwater tsunamis, or caves collapsing under the sea cause skyquakes. Others believe the sounds come from planes making loud sonic booms. But that doesn't explain old records of skyquakes from the past before planes were even invented. Some scientists think a type of meteor called a bolide causes these booms. These meteors blow up when they hit Earth's atmosphere. If this happened above thick clouds, the sound would get louder and travel far, but we wouldn't find anything on the ground. Another idea is that gas might be escaping from the bottom of deep lakes, like Lake Seneca. If you think skyquakes are bizarre, let me introduce you to fog bows. They also go under the name of white rainbows, ghost rainbows, or cloud bows. They form in a similar way to regular colorful rainbows, but are much wider. Rainbows happen when there are big raindrops in the sky, and you can always spot them on the opposite side of where the sun is shining. Fog bows are made by tiny droplets in fog, or clouds, instead of big raindrops, and they also appear opposite the sun. If you want to see a fog bow, you need to look for it in a thin fog when the sun is bright. You might catch one when the sun starts to shine through the fog, or if you're near the ocean where fog often forms. Because the water droplets in fog are so tiny, fog bows don't have bright colors like rainbows. They might even look all white, or just have faint colors. Some fog bows are hard to see at first because they blend into the mist, but once you spot them, they're easy to recognize. The next rare weather phenomenon you gotta watch out for is thunder snow. You guessed it right, it's a special type of thunderstorm that happens during a snowstorm. Unlike regular thunderstorms that often strike in the spring and summer, thunder snow is much rarer because it happens in the strongest winter storms, like big blizzards, and at the same time needs warm air, which isn't a frequent combo. So, for thunder snow to happen, there needs to be moisture in the air, some instability, and something to lift the air, like rising winds. Just like in normal thunderstorms, lightning can appear when you hear thunder. Thunder snow lightning usually goes from cloud to cloud instead of hitting the ground, and the thunder sounds different too, more like a low rumble instead of a loud boom, because the snow muffles the sound. You aren't so likely to get struck by it, but it's still important to stay inside when you hear thunder to stay safe. Northern Lights fans, this one is for you. Scientists noticed a new kind of glow in the sky that looked like a purple streak. They nicknamed it Steve as a joke, but later gave it a more scientific name: Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement, Steve for short. Steve is actually a fast-moving stream of super hot gas that always moves west and only shows up before midnight. They wondered if something like Steve could happen after midnight, but moving in the opposite direction. And now, scientists think they found the anti-Steve by looking at data from a research station in Norway. In December 2021, they took a picture of a bright purple streak stretching for 620 miles in the sky, and it only appeared after midnight. Satellites from the European Space Agency also measured the conditions in this part of the sky and found that the ions were moving eastward. Steve's late-night twin hasn't been officially named yet, but it would be cool if it was called SAM, which is short for Steve after midnight. If you've ever seen snow on a sunny day when falling from the sky without a single cloud, it must have been diamond dust. It's a special kind of weather with millions of tiny ice crystals forming close to the ground. These ice crystals float slowly in the air, kind of like how dust floats in your house. When sunlight hits these crystals, they sparkle like diamonds. Unlike regular snow, diamond dust can fall from a cloudless sky, which is why they sometimes call it clear sky precipitation. It happens because of temperature inversion. Normally, it gets colder as you go higher up from the ground. But in a temperature inversion, the cold air stays near the ground, and warmer air sits above it. The warm air has more water vapor, and when it mixes with cold air near the ground, it turns directly into ice crystals, and diamond dust is born. For this to happen, the air near the ground has to be really, really cold, way below freezing temperature. Diamond dust can fall for days, but it's so light that it usually doesn't pile up on the ground like regular snow. A fall streak hole, also known as a hole punch cloud, is next on our list. This big circular or oval-shaped gap sometimes appears in certain clouds. These types of clouds float high up in the sky and are often made of tiny water droplets that are colder than freezing, but they haven't frozen yet. These special water droplets are called supercooled, and they need a reason to freeze. Ice crystals give them that reason. When a plane flies through the cloud, it can bring those ice crystals into the cloud. Once the ice crystals are there, the supercooled water droplets freeze quickly, get bigger, and start to fall from the ground. This creates a hole in the cloud, and as more nearby droplets freeze, the hole gets bigger and spreads outward. Any tornado is scary, but a fire tornado takes the horror to a new level. These bad boys are spinning towers of flame and ash that form when there's extreme heat, strong winds, and uneven ground. The intense heat from the fire causes hot air to rise quickly. Cooler air from the sides rushes in to replace it and creates strong winds. When winds from different directions meet, it makes the fire spin like a tornado. It gets stronger and can even create its own weather. It pulls in flames, ash, dirt, and anything in its path. The winds can reach speeds of over 140 miles per hour, and these fire tornadoes can last for more than 20 minutes.
If you had landed on Earth a really, really long time ago, about 1.5 billion years in the past, you wouldn't have recognized our planet. At that time, all the land was stuck together in one giant supercontinent called Nuna, which was surrounded by an endless ocean. But if you had stuck around, you would have witnessed a planetary-scale disaster, Nuna falling apart. But the most amazing thing is that apparently, when Nuna started breaking apart, it kicked off changes that made Earth a much better place for life. Scientists used to call this part of Earth's history the boring billion. It lasted from about 1.8 billion to 800 million years ago. Not much seemed to happen during that time, hence the name. No big climate changes, no bizarre life forms, and nothing very dramatic. Turns out the name isn't very fair. Things may have looked calm on the surface, but underneath, Earth was changing a lot. Continents were moving, splitting apart, and coming back together. Two massive supercontinents, Nuna and later Rodinia, formed and broke up during this time. When Nuna began to break apart, huge cracks opened between the drifting land pieces. Water filled those spaces, creating shallow seas. Those seas were warmer, calmer, and had more oxygen than the deep oceans that existed before. And that might have changed everything. The new seas created friendlier conditions for life to grow and change. Scientists now think they may have helped early life become more complex. They looked back 1.8 billion years and rebuilt how Earth's tectonic plates moved over time. Plus, they tracked how carbon was stored inside the planet and released into the air. The researchers did this using a new advanced computer model that gave way more detail than they had ever had before. They found out that during the 350 million years of the so-called boring billion, the amount of shallow seas along the edges of continents doubled. Altogether, these coastlines stretched about 81,000 miles. That's more than 3 times around Earth at the equator. At the same time, subduction zones, places where one tectonic plate slides under another, actually got shorter as the continents shifted around. This is important because subduction zones are where a lot of volcanoes come from. When one plate sinks under another, seawater gets dragged deep into the Earth. That water helps rocks melt, creating magma. The magma rises, erupts as volcanoes, and releases gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So when there were fewer subduction zones, there were fewer volcanoes, and less carbon dioxide was pumped into the air. It went like this. The supercontinent Nuna broke apart, and it created lots of brand new ocean floors in young seas that didn't exist before. These new ocean floors pulled carbon dioxide out of the air. Seawater flowed into cracks in the ocean floor. When that happened, carbon got trapped in rocks, forming limestone. Over time, this process locked carbon away inside Earth instead of letting it stay in the atmosphere. With less carbon dioxide, Earth slowly cooled down. That cooler climate helped the new shallow seas become stable and rich in oxygen. Such calm, oxygen-filled environments are perfect for life to become more complex. Those huge shallow seas near the continents acted like safe nurseries for early life. They may have helped eukaryotes evolve faster. Eukaryotes are living things with complex cells. Cells that have parts inside them, like a nucleus that holds DNA. Every animal, plant, and fungus on Earth comes from these kinds of cells. So when eukaryotes appeared, it was a huge moment in the history of life. Scientists already knew that eukaryotes showed up during the boring billion because of fossils that are about 1 billion years old, but they didn't really know why this happened at that time. Now, scientists want to find better preserved early eukaryote fossils to learn exactly how complex life first evolved. Life on Earth started over 3 billion years ago. It began with tiny, simple microbes and slowly turned into a huge variety of living things. We still don't have a clear answer about how living things came out of that early primordial soup. But even though there's no final answer yet, scientists have come up with several theories to try to explain how life on Earth may have started. Some scientists think lightning helped start life on Earth. The idea is pretty simple. Lightning is a powerful spark, and sparks can cause chemical reactions. In a famous experiment from 1952, scientists showed that electric sparks could turn simple gases like water vapor and methane into amino acids and sugars, which are basic building blocks of life. This suggested that lightning in early Earth storms might have helped create the first life ingredients. But later research showed Earth's early air wasn't exactly like the experiment. Still, some scientists think volcanic clouds could have had the right gases and lots of lightning, making this process possible. Other experts think life may have started on clay. One researcher suggested that tiny clay crystals could grow and stick together in patterns. As they did, they could trap simple molecules and line them up in organized ways. Think of clay as a kind of early organizer. Today, DNA tells molecules how to line up and work together. But what if clay had been doing a similar job before DNA even existed? It could be helping molecules arrange themselves until they eventually learned to organize on their own. This idea was interesting and got a lot of attention, but most scientists don't fully accept it yet. Another popular theory is that life started at deep-sea vents on the ocean floor. These vents are cracks in Earth's crust where super hot water shoots out from deep inside the planet. As the water rises, it picks up important chemicals like carbon and hydrogen, which are key ingredients for life. The vents are full of tiny rock spaces where these chemicals could collect, mix, and react. The rocks may have helped speed up these reactions. Even today, deep-sea vents house rich ecosystems, even though it's dark there and the whole environment is kinda extreme. Scientists are still studying this idea. In 2019, researchers even created early life-like structures in lab conditions similar to these vents. Such an experiment showed that this theory could really work. Another idea is that life may have started under ice. Scientists believe Earth's oceans might have been covered in ice around 3 billion years ago. Sounds pretty severe, right? But the cold may have actually helped life get started. Many of the chemical building blocks of life, like simple amino acids, are more stable at low temperatures. In warmer water, these molecules break down quickly and are spread far apart. But when water freezes, it pushes those molecules together, increasing their concentration. This crowding makes chemical reactions more likely. So, let's say the molecules were packed closer together and were breaking down more slowly. In this case, they had more chances to link up and form more complex structures. Ice may have also acted like a protective blanket. It could shield the water from harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun and from damage caused by meteor impacts. Another idea is that life didn't start on Earth at all. This theory is called panspermia, and it suggests that life came from space. Scientists know that big asteroid impacts can blast rocks off of planets. For example, rocks from Mars have been knocked into space before, and some of them ended up on Earth. Some researchers think tiny microbes might have survived inside space rocks during the journey. If that's true, life here could have started thanks to visitors from Mars or some other cosmic world. Others go even further and suggest that life could have traveled on comets or space dust from completely different star systems, hitching a ride across the galaxy. At the same time, even if panspermia is real, it doesn't fully solve the mystery. It just moves the question somewhere else. Instead of asking how life began on Earth, we'd need to ask, how did life begin anywhere in the universe?
A magnitude 15 earthquake has the potential to completely destroy our planet and evaporate all the water in a matter of seconds, leaving Earth uninhabitable. Over 500,000 earthquakes happen annually, but none have a magnitude of 15. 90% of quakes occur in the terrifying Ring of Fire zone located around the Pacific Ocean. The ground there is like jello. It shakes almost constantly. The most powerful earthquake to have ever struck Earth had a magnitude of 9.5. That much power can lengthen or shorten the day. But there's probably an earthquake in the confines of your own home now caused by a speck of dust landing on a table. But it has a power of negative 15 magnitudes. Earthquakes happen when tectonic plates move. They're like Lego pieces that are not properly secured, and when they move up, down, or hit one another, the ground also moves, triggering earthquakes. This tectonic energy acts like a battery. It stores energy for a long time, up to 500 years. When this stored energy is released in a sudden burst, the consequences are horrifying. Even the strongest structures submit to this relentless force that leaves a trail of destruction in its path. In some instances, earthquakes can even trigger tsunamis, amplifying the chaos. Such a crazy amount of power can split the ground open and cause severe damage. The strength of an earthquake is measured by the Richter scale, but now it's being replaced by the moment magnitude scale. When there's an earthquake, we hear about how strong it is. It's usually from 1 to 10. Luckily, we haven't had a Richter scale earthquake yet. The most powerful earthquake to have ever happened in modern history occurred in Chile in the 60s. It was around 9.5 on the Richter scale, and it altered Earth's rotation and messed up the length of the day by around 2 milliseconds. It also triggered a massive tsunami and affected a vast area of 155,000 square miles. The Richter scale doesn't actually have a limit. Still, anything above 25 doesn't need measuring, because if that ever happened, we would simply turn into dust, and nobody would care to measure this disaster. As we said, the strongest earthquake had a magnitude of 9.5. If this magnitude had been just 0.5 stronger, it would have created a ruptured line 2,174 miles long. That is almost 7 times the size of Wyoming. A magnitude 11 earthquake would create a crack halfway around the world. Massive tsunamis would hit coastal areas, destroying everything, and Earth would get into a massive environmental crisis. If you love hiking, you would have new mountains to explore, created by the terrifying earthquake. Even the temperature would increase because of volcanic eruptions and the resulting greenhouse gases. It would turn our planet into a hot oven. The safest places would be far away from any buildings, seas, oceans, and mountains where there would be a low chance of a landslide. Countries unprepared for earthquakes would be totally destroyed, and cities would turn into piles of rubble and dust. Going up on the Richter scale would only make things worse. But don't worry, an earthquake of that power is impossible. Earth's crust doesn't have enough energy to produce such earthquakes. But there is something that has much more power and can produce mega earthquakes. Asteroids are powerful enough to destroy our planet, as we all know from the dinosaur era. That asteroid was around 6 miles long, and it caused massive damage to the planet. It triggered earthquakes that shook the ground constantly for months. These terrifying quakes were about 50,000 times stronger than the Chile earthquake. They also triggered a tsunami that was 30,000 times more powerful than the Indian Ocean tsunami. And the latter was one of the most devastating tsunamis to have ever struck Earth. The earthquakes caused by the asteroid had a magnitude of 11, making it the most powerful and scariest natural disaster ever. And let's hope it stays that way. The Indian Ocean tsunami affected only certain areas of the world. Meanwhile, the asteroid tsunami affected every part of the world and had 33-foot-tall waves. Even if you had traveled to the most remote place on Earth, you wouldn't have been able to hide from this Grim Reaper. A 15-magnitude earthquake wouldn't be 15% stronger than the Chile earthquake. The scale doesn't work like that. It would be around 100 million times more powerful than a 9.5 magnitude quake. It could make all the water on Earth evaporate, leaving us devastated and without any H2O to survive. All ecosystems would collapse. All food chains would be broken. And only some super strong bacteria would probably survive the impossible. That is only a fraction of the frightening things that could happen. The ocean is like the AC for our planet. Without it, Earth would be super hot. The ocean also serves as a shield from the sun's powerful rays. It acts as a heat absorber and cools Earth. Scientists think that the most dangerous thing would be the inability of Earth's crust to survive the violent shakes of the 15-magnitude earthquake. If our planet miraculously survived and didn't turn into dust, there would be massive openings in its crust. The ground would become gelatinous. It would randomly move up, down, left, and right, and no building would survive that. Our civilization would be brought back to the Stonehenge era. Tectonic movements like this are devastating. A similar thing happened in Japan when tectonic plates moved 165 feet from each other and then snapped back together, creating a 9-magnitude earthquake. No place on Earth is immune to this bone-chilling natural phenomenon. Still, certain places have higher chances of being destroyed than others, like the Ring of Fire, where 90% of earthquakes happen. This is a place where earthquakes are almost everyday occurrences. The Ring of Fire is located in the Pacific Ocean. It forms a ring around the continents that surround the Pacific. There, several tectonic plates meet, creating highly unstable ground. To make the problem much more terrifying, 75% of active volcanoes are located in this area. 90% of dormant volcanoes are also there, making this place extremely dangerous. Scientists carefully study this region to find a way to predict when the next earthquake might strike. The Ring of Fire is not the only place at risk of earthquakes. In California, along the San Andreas fault line, 2 tectonic plates have been storing power for more than 200 years. The San Andreas Fault is 715 miles long and has the potential for a massive earthquake. This region has its fear of violent earthquakes like the one that happened in San Francisco in 1906. It had a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale. Scientists' predictions are terrifying. They say that the chance of a 6.7 magnitude earthquake is very high in the area. If all hell starts to break loose, you should know how to survive. Avoid anything that might fall on you, like windows, closets, or unstable ceilings. The official phrase from emergency experts is drop, cover, and hold on. Stay low to the ground. Hide under something stable like a table, and remain there until the shaking stops. Make sure to stay in your shelter for another minute or 2, just in case there are aftershocks or loose debris. Use your nose and smell for gas. If you do smell it, don't turn the lights on or do anything that might ignite it. Stay strong and be safe.
Miami's luxury towers have everything. Car elevators, rooftop pools, celebrity neighborhoods, and something completely unexpected called gradual descent. A new study shows dozens of beachfront high-rises are slowly sinking into the ground. Just a couple of inches over a few years and still moving. What's going on? And is it going to get worse? Let's find out. When you look at a map of South Florida, the city of Miami is mostly on the mainland. Just off the coast lies a long barrier island. That's Miami Beach, the stretch you see in most drone shots and travel clips. Fancy cars, the beach, the clubs, the glass towers right next to the water, that's all on this island. But it didn't always look like that. For a long time, this area was mostly older hotels and simple apartment buildings. As prices went up and richer buyers started chasing ocean views, developers began knocking those down and putting luxury high-rises in their place. Floor by floor, that island turned into a narrow wall of glass facing the Atlantic Ocean. Now, here's the problem. Miami Beach sits only 4 to 5 feet above sea level. That's barely enough height for comfort. Each fall, king tides push water up through drains and across certain streets on bright, clear days. The flooding sometimes gets so bad that locals could kayak through parking lots for fun. That might sound like a funny video, but for researchers, it raised a serious question. Could the same landscape be shifting beneath the towers too? Some buildings had already shown signs of movement, and the question became whether the ground itself was still settling under all that concrete and steel. To find out, scientists used a method called INSAR, which stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar. It works by having satellites scan the same spot on Earth over and over using radar to detect tiny changes in elevation. It's like watching a tower in slow motion from space, tracking whether it holds steady or slowly sinks. Those scans stack hundreds of satellite passes over the same balcony corners and roof edges. It's the same kind of radar NASA uses to track volcanoes and ground shifts. With enough images, researchers can spot motion as small as the thickness of a credit card. Between 2016 and 2023, they focused on this section of coastline from Sunny Isles to Miami Beach. The data showed that at least 35 high-rise buildings had moved downward over that period. In some cases, the ground had dropped just under an inch. In others, it was closer to 3. That may not seem like much, but over a short time, and in structures this heavy, it means something's off. These weren't new buildings under construction. Most were already finished, which makes the continued movement unusual. In theory, they should have settled and stopped, but they didn't. So what exactly is making the ground sink under these towers? Let's look underground. Specifically, right under these nice-looking buildings. Beneath the island is a mix of sand and Miami limestone. It is strong enough to build on, but it behaves more like hardened coral than solid mountain rock. Water moves through it, pressure moves through it, and sometimes the ground shifts in ways engineers can't properly predict. One possible explanation is something called creep deformation. It sounds like a villain from a B-movie, but it's actually a slow-motion rearranging of particles under constant pressure. Imagine parking a heavy truck on soft ground. It makes little dents right away, but if the truck stays there for a long time, those dents slowly get deeper. The ground keeps squishing a tiny bit at a time. That slow squishing is what might be happening under these buildings. But it's not just the weight. Construction itself can wake the ground up. Pile drivers, excavation, and heavy machinery can shake the sandy layers enough that older buildings nearby start shifting again. The study also found that some of the newer towers showed stronger movement overall, likely because the soil beneath them was still adjusting after recent construction. And then there's the water. The limestone underneath acts like a sponge, soaking up water from the ocean below and the rain above. When that water moves around, it quietly eats away at the rock and shifts the sand that holds everything up. That's how the ground slowly loosens. So, we have a spongy ground, heavy buildings, and the constant shaking from construction. Plus, water flowing through the rock. Over time, all of that adds up. It presses down just a little at first, then a little more. We're only talking inches, but even small uneven shifts can be enough to make engineers nervous. So, what does this mean for the buildings and all the people making social media reels? Probably, and hopefully nothing. At least not tomorrow. We're still far away from disaster movie scenarios. Structures won't topple over. There won't be sudden sinkholes swallowing cars. It's not how it works. But this problem does raise some eyebrows, especially after what happened just a few miles north in Surfside. In 2021, the Champlain Towers south partially collapsed. It was a huge tragedy that Miami will remember forever. That disaster didn't happen just because the ground moved. Issues kept piling up slowly over the years. Engineers discovered cracks, rust, and bad drainage. The building was falling apart from all sides, and then it was too late to do anything about it. But since then, the city has been paying more attention. Engineers are reassessing older buildings near the coast, and local officials are pushing for stricter inspections. The radar data doesn't mean a building is unsafe, but it can be an early warning. A signal that something deserves a closer look. For residents, though, there's a catch. Right now, there's no rule that says developers or building managers have to monitor ground movement with satellite scans. The study didn't involve teams going inside or taking core samples. It was just a space-based scan from above. If you zoom out from the sinking tower drama and look at that long strip of land, it's already one of the weirdest pieces of real estate on the planet. A good portion of the Miami lifestyle is literally fake land. Star Island, Palm, Hibiscus, the Venetian chain, and a bunch of other spots started as sand at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. The bay was dredged in the 1920s. The sand was piled into islands, and developers turned those piles into celebrity neighborhoods where houses now cost tens of millions of dollars. Some of the richest people on Earth treat this area like their private game board. Fisher Island, just off South Beach, currently has the most expensive zip code in the United States, with a median listing price in the 8-figure range. A bit farther up sits Indian Creek, known as the Billionaire Bunker. It has only 41 houses, its own police force, and neighbors like Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. One empty 1.8-acre lot there was recently listed for around $200 million, just for the dirt and the view. And all of this floats along the edge of Biscayne Bay, next to an actual national park full of beautiful marine creatures like dolphins, manatees, and sea turtles. More than 100 bottlenose dolphins live in and around the bay year-round, racing past boat docks and tall condos, like they're extras in someone else's movie. So, what happens next? Engineers keep scanning, inspectors keep checking, and everyone online keeps posting drone shots like nothing odd is happening under their feet. That's Miami, a strange blend of glamour and physics that never quite behaves. It's not a crisis, it's a maintenance routine. As long as the people in charge pay attention to quieter signals like slow dips in elevation or small structural changes, the skyline should hold. Maybe it settles a bit. Maybe it stretches and groans. Now that engineers and scientists are aware of this issue, they can prepare and propose solutions. Until then, the towers will still be up and the bay will still shine bright. The whole city will keep drifting in its own style, just slightly downward. 7,500 years ago, the Pacific floor collapsed. Massive landslides buried the seabed in seconds. Fast forward to today, robot subs have examined the place. Scans have revealed proof of at least 10 distinct cyclical megaquakes. Now, researchers warn, the plates are still locked and building pressure, even today. If they start moving, that could trigger new red alert earthquakes and send disastrous tsunamis toward the coast. Let's look at the map. The fault here is like a giant zipper. It's over 600 miles, stretching from northern California to Canada. It's called the Cascadia subduction zone, and it's a part of the Ring of Fire. You know, the famous giant horseshoe around the Pacific that can serve as your where-to-go reminder if you're into volcanic and earthquake tourism. One of Cascadia's biggest events happened around the year 1700. There are no local written records of it, but there is a story. A well-known indigenous legend tells of an epic battle between a thunderbird and a whale. In the story, the thunderbird's wing beats make the ground shake. The whale's thrashing sends seawater flooding inland. The thunderbird wins by finally grabbing the whale and slamming it back down, shaking the land itself. Many researchers believe that this legend originated from the real earthquake of 1700. But we don't just have cool myths to give us the full picture. In the early 1700s, samurai officials recorded waves flooding villages and rice fields. But nobody felt the earthquake that must come first. That's why they nicknamed this event the Orphan Tsunami. But it did have a parent, and it took scientists 300 years to finally connect it back to Cascadia. To see Cascadia's past, researchers sent robot subs to scan the bottom in crazy detail. They expected to see a simple crack, but what they found looked more like giant underwater steps. Some of those steps are about 33 feet tall, like a 3-story building. That only happens when a big piece of the seafloor snaps off, breaks loose, and slides all at once, not slowly. When that happens, it kicks up a mud avalanche. Picture a jar of dirt and water. Shake it hard, and a fresh layer settles at the bottom. Each layer is basically a timestamp from a huge quake. When scientists counted and dated them, they found 10 separate megaquakes that hit one after the other over thousands of years. That means that Cascadia doesn't let pressure out little by little. It stays stuck for a long time, then suddenly breaks out violently. That pattern is why the Cascadia subduction zone is considered one of the scariest fault systems in North America today. So what's actually happening down there? The plates aren't sliding smoothly, they're stuck. And while they're stuck, the coastline is getting quietly bent out of shape like a ruler you're flexing in your hands. It doesn't look dramatic day to day, but it's been loading up for centuries. When that tension finally snaps, the coast will instantly drop. Geologists call this co-seismic subsidence. We're talking about the ground plunging 6 to 8 feet vertically in a matter of minutes. Imagine standing on a beach. The shaking stops, and you realize the ocean is rushing in. Not just because of a wave, but because the land you're standing on has physically sunk below sea level. That one move is enough to shove the seafloor out of position and force the ocean above it to react. Cascadia can produce a magnitude 9.0. That's top tier, categorized as the most destructive natural event that can happen. It can shake the ground for minutes, pushing and pulling everything back and forth until buildings and bridges start falling down. A 9.0 class quake also means the seafloor is vibrating and shifting, lifting in some spots, dropping in others, all in one sudden motion. A tsunami starts when the seafloor moves and pushes a huge amount of water out of the way. If the bottom suddenly lifts or drops, the water above it gets displaced instantly. That water has to go somewhere, so it races outward in every direction. Out in deep water, that wave is rarely tall. It spreads out across a long distance, so it can pass under ships without anyone noticing. The danger is speed. In the open ocean, tsunamis can travel around 500 to 600 miles per hour. That's like traveling from New York to Detroit in 60 minutes. Eventually, the ocean starts to pile up, getting taller by the second. Near shore, it can stack up to tens of feet, and in extreme cases, it can run up to 100 feet on land. It swallows the coast, then drags everything back to sea with a violent tug before the next hit arrives. But that's not all. When the fault snaps, it often triggers massive underwater landslides. When a huge chunk of seafloor collapses, it can shove water locally, like dropping a boulder into a tub. In the Cascadia subduction zone, you aren't just dealing with the earthquake's kick. You're getting a 1-2 punch from the shifting crust and the crumbling slopes combined. On parts of the Oregon coast, emergency experts say the shaking could last 5 to 7 minutes, long enough to realize what's happening and still won't be over. Then comes the scariest part. In some places, a tsunami can hit in 15 to 30 minutes. Remember, the earthquake is a warning. If you're on the coast and you feel strong, long shaking, you do not need to wait for a text alert or a siren, or someone on the news to yell tsunami. During the tremors, the basic recommendation is to literally drop to the ground, cover, and hold on, staying away from windows and chandeliers that can fall on you. As tempting as it is, we shouldn't stop to make a reel out of the situation. Before anything happens, make one decision while your brain is calm. Pick the closest high ground and go for it. Not somewhere uphill, an actual spot. If you ever needed a reason to learn your neighborhood, this is it. Your instinct might say, get into the car and drive. But don't. Roads are probably jammed and bridges could be damaged. People who live on the coast already know to keep it practical, with shoes on the bed and a go bag prepared just in case. The danger doesn't end with the first impact because the tsunami waves, well, they come in waves. The initial hit is rarely the largest, and the ocean can continue to pulse in and out for hours. This creates a violent tug-of-war. The receding water acts like a massive vacuum, dragging anything caught in the backwash out to sea. Japan's 2011 disaster is the most recent vivid example of what a magnitude 9.1 can do. The seafloor shifted in a single massive heave, and minutes later, the ocean literally rearranged the coast. A huge wall of water crashed inland, reaching over 100 feet high in some spots, and turning the coastline into a conveyor belt of debris. It was like water turned cars into giant bowling balls and shipping containers into massive metal bricks, smashing ports and drowning low-lying airports and electrical substations. Finally, what do officials say about the timeline for the possible next disaster hitting Cascadia? Well, they can't give us precise dates, but they did announce some odds. For the biggest, scariest earthquake possible, the United States Geological Survey says there is about a 10% to 15% chance it'll happen in the next 50 years. Chances for a quake that isn't the mega version are 1 in 3 in the next 5 decades. Those odds are actually pretty high. But here is why it isn't all that grim. Scientists know this isn't random. Cascadia has a pattern, and patterns are what preparation runs on. We already know how to build for big shaking, and we're getting better at spotting where stress is building. It doesn't mean we can stop the earthquake, but it means we're getting way better at knowing what to expect. In the meantime, just keep a go bag by the door and maybe take a walk around your neighborhood.